Recording in progress.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brookline School Committee meeting for Thursday, January 23rd, 2025. You get me tonight. Andy's here remotely. He's a little under the weather. Stephen's here remotely. He's a little under the weather. And Val, I believe, is remote, and she is a little under the weather. So we hope all our committee members get well soon. Yeah, like flies. And we do appreciate that you are attending the meeting, even when you're not feeling well. So thank you for those efforts. It's not always fun. Okay, we're going to move right along. First is our consent agenda. Do I have a motion to move the consent agenda? Thank you, Mariah. Do I have a second? Thank you, Carolyn. Are there any questions or comments before we take a vote? Jesse?
I just, in rereading them today again, I wanted to just thank Betsy for a really comprehensive and descriptive job. I felt by reading them like I was there again. So thank you very much. It was really, that was, thank you.
Also,
Helen?
the art students' trip to New York sounds fantastic.
It does. It reminded me when I was, just on the side, when I was at University of Connecticut, and the art teacher took us down to New York City, and it was so much fun, and it's such a great experience. So I'm excited for that trip. Excited for it. Okay, we'll take a vote. Jesse?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
Helen?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
And Val?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Thank you. Karen, what's up to you? Our student report.
All right, so this is the January School Committee report, Life at BHS once again. This will be a little bit of a shorter report, but we are looking forward at BHS to a lot of things in the coming weeks. So first, and perhaps most importantly this week, is our mid-year exam period. So yesterday was the first day of mid-year exams, began with language and social studies. Today was math and English, and tomorrow, for me at least, there's only one, so that's a blessing. But for some, there are two. The mid-year exam period, actually, just as a personal comment, this is my last mid-year exam at the high school. And the other day I was just thinking, I was like, this is such a bittersweet moment. But then I realized that, in college you will have to do a lot of mid-year exams. So, closing one chapter and opening another. But we also had at BHS our Student Government Assembly at the beginning of the month. So just a week after coming back, the student government held a Know Your Rights Assembly for all BHS students. This is an annual production by the Student Council, the Student Legislature, and then the BHS Student Judiciary. And really what it focuses on is ensuring that all BHS students are sort of in tune with the handbook and that they know what rights, what freedoms they're accorded per the BHS Student Handbook. So a lot of the questions that, for example, the student government got from the average student was, can I postpone certain tests? Can I do all these sorts of things, especially relative to testing? That's one of the biggest sort of concerns that students have, and also one of the biggest areas in which a lot of students don't know how many rights they're afforded. And so this is always, just it's always well put together by the student government. And it really is informative for a lot of students. And I've had a lot of students come up to me after it's done and just say, that they didn't know a lot about what their rights were for the handbook, and that these sort of assemblies always help them out a lot. Moving on, BHS Theater. This is a very brightly colored slide. I apologize for that. But BHS, the theater and the drama societies at BHS have a lot going on this month and next month. So next month, the BHS Drama Society will perform their show Mean Girls. Every year, they put on a production. This year, they chose Mean Girls. And our headmaster, Mr. Meyer, actually commented that he hopes that the spirit of sort of the production can sort of foster open dialogue among everybody and continue to build a BHS spirit. And then the Theater for Social Change, which is a class offered by the Performing Arts Department, performed a show on censorship last week. I believe it was last Friday, in the 22 Tappan Theater. It was called Censor, I Hardly Know Her. And it was about censorship, just how censorship affects everybody in their daily lives, and different scenarios in which censorship exists. And I actually had a lot of people, a lot of friends of mine who saw the show, and they really commented that it was a very well put together production. And then it's also January, a busy month for BHS athletics. Right now we're in the winter season, which will last until about the end of February. So the boys varsity ice hockey game, they hosted Skate with a Warrior. So they actually got youth hockey, so those who are in middle school and elementary school, to come down, play with them January 11th. And fans actually contributed donations to the Brookline Food Pantry, so it was a really, really good way to build community. And the boys varsity ice hockey team has actually been on a tear recently. I do have to say they came in third at the state Beanpot tournament. So congratulations to them. The BHS squash team, which, as a lot of you guys know, has been coached by Steve Lantos for many years. They actually, we won the inaugural Boston Public High School Squash Championships, which was a tournament that was actually in large part contributed to by Steve. And so it was a very good win. BHS squash is actually the best public school team right now in the state. So, really, really great. And then looking ahead.
Didn't they win the nationals last year?
2 years ago, yeah. But looking ahead to big things this year as well. And then on the theme of looking ahead, next week is actually going to be a very busy and very important week for BHS students. Quarter 2 ends Tuesday, so the first semester will officially have ended. We also celebrate Lunar New Year on Wednesday. The Brookline's Asian American Pacific Islander Club, APAC, usually puts on an annual celebration near the end of February. So right before February vacation, we usually have a celebration. And I imagine that will occur this year, so just a few weeks after Lunar New Year. We're also on Tuesday going to be celebrating our annual Day of Racial Reform and Solidarity, so DOORS. This event was pushed back, but now it's going to be held on January 28th for 4 blocks out of 5 in the day. And then we'll also host details forthcoming from Clifton Jones, who will be putting on this, but we'll host an annual Martin Luther King Day celebration later in next week. I imagine either Thursday or Friday. But once again, more details are going to be coming from Clifton Jones, who's one of our administrators at the high school. So I can certainly provide you guys those when students receive them. That was the month of January, and VHS students are looking ahead to February, looking ahead to the start of the 3rd quarter and the start of the 2nd semester. So.
Yeah, Karen, a question. The January 9th meeting where kids know their rights, students get to know their rights, is that the only one held during the year? And if so, why isn't it during the first 2 weeks of September, so students aren't as confused about what their rights are, say, until mid-year?
Yeah, so this was actually the 2nd assembly that the student government put on. Usually we have one at the beginning of the year and then one midway through, just so that students are able to recap. But this is usually a bigger assembly, a far more formal one takes place during advisory, in which all students 9th grade through 12th grade get to listen in.
On the calendar on the last slide, what are the 2 blocks in red on the Doors Day?
Betsy,
Oh,
we
yeah.
can't hear the room, or we can hear. Sorry. I was asking what on this slide on the calendar with the two red outlined blocks.
Oh, yeah. So that was just marked for us by our administrators when they sent us the schedule, just to make sure the students know that we start with C block instead of A block. Usually on Tuesdays, we actually don't have A block. So this was just a special schedule. And they just wanted to ensure, our administrators wanted to ensure that we all saw that there was actually an A block and that the day started with C block.
Okay, thank you so much. You know you're welcome to stay as long as you want, or if you need to go study, you can do that too. Okay, we're now up to the superintendent's report. Do we know who our guests are in the audience? I'm just curious. Do we know? You're with NBC? Oh, did we know you were coming? Oh, okay. I'm sorry, what? Well, you don't have to, I guess, but it's nice to know.
Good after. Is this on? Can you hear me? Let me see yours. Good afternoon, everyone. A little loud there. I want to begin our superintendent's update, walking through a few slides, and then I will have some open commentary on a few items based on a few questions received. Feedback on our updated civil rights and bullying policies. PSB places high importance on ensuring students' safety and fostering a welcoming and affirming learning environment and working environment for all of our members of our community. As part of that commitment, we are revisiting and revising our student civil rights and bullying policies, protocols, and reporting forms. So this information has been shared out to the community, but the highlight that we want to make sure is that the survey will be open for providing feedback until January 31st. So this is a reminder there. Sure.
I had a question about this because right now we have an interim filling this position that would be overseeing these policies and procedures, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So,
As well as other team members as well.
okay, I guess I was a little bit surprised that we were revising things when we had an interim in place and not a permanent person.
Well, remember, this falls up under the Office of Student Services, which Lisa is very much.
Okay, so it's being overseen
Absolutely.
not by just the interim, but.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Multi-tiered systems of support. The Office of Teaching and Learning has established a multi-tiered.
I had a question too to follow Mariah's, if I may. Maybe Stephen can help me on this, but in policy subcommittee, are we in the middle of what's going on with this, or is this coming from the side in terms of the policy side?
So part of it you get updates on. There, the policy itself undergoes some minor tweaking at each year. I think you're supposed to review these every 2 years as such, but it won't be a hard-scale rewrite in that regard, but more of an update. So we're in the process of gathering feedback on that, and that will help inform the work of the committee as well.
So which committee is working on, oh, sorry, Stephen, thank you.
Yeah, the policy subcommittee.
So there's 5 documents that OSS has been working on, and they are forms, protocols, and policies. The forms and protocols are being updated by OSS, and the policy recommendations are going to be taken up for consideration by the policy subcommittee at the next meeting, which is, I believe, on Monday.
Right.
In the documents that we're going to review for that, we're going to also review the forms and protocols with which the policy recommendations align. But it's the school committee's purview to adopt new civil rights policies and bullying policies. Is that the gist of your question, Jesse?
Not really.
Sorry.
I mean, like, I'm not a parent of a kids in the system, so I didn't even know the survey was sent out. So there's feedback that's going to come in to somewhere from parents about how they feel or issues that they've had in terms of civil rights and bullying in the district? And that's-
Looking at the materials that have been shared with them. So feedback on those actual documents that have been sent out. And that went out I think it went out to staff last week, and I believe it went out to parents this week, earlier this week.
So Stephen, we take this input in subcommittee and then utilize it to tweak the policy biennially? Is that the question? Is that the process?
The policy isn't tweaked with any regularity. It's what OSS is recommending updates to bring it into compliance with changes to Title IX since it was last reviewed. So that's why it's been docketed. I think OSS and its consultant, when they meet with us, will review the reasons for the changes to the protocol and the forms. I can't speak to that, though.
Thanks.
Can I ask a question? Sorry. I didn't hear the answer to Jesse's question. Where does the feedback go? Who uses the feedback? Is it the committee? Is it the staff who then digest it and say?
Goes back to the staff.
I see. Thank
Yep.
Sorry, I don't want to really belabor this, and I'm trying to bring it up, and it's 5 things. So it's a policy, but it's not being done by our policy school
The
committee.
policy there, I believe, is the Title IX, the Title IX regulation, which at the time, if you recall, in August, there were the Biden administration issued new regulations around Title IX. Those new regulations have since been vacated by a judge as such, but we're still bringing that forward for the committee to actually look at. So right now, my understanding is that we've reverted back to the previous iteration of Title IX. But it's still, our labor council, to answer your question about who generated the actual policy, our labor council actually built the policy for us to make sure that we were compliant with the new regulations at the time.
Okay, so is our outside counsel the consultant that's being referred to?
No, that's the interim.
Oh,
Yes.
I see.
Yep.
Okay. So it's a bullying prevention form, a community incident reporting form, a student civil rights and bullying incident. I guess we'll see it when we see it.
Yeah,
It's
and
a lot.
those are more
It's a lot to
FY
digest.
Yeah, those are more, the protocols are more of an FYI for you as they relate to the actual policy pieces. Just to say that we're getting more current with the collection of information.
Okay, and then one more question following on what somebody else asked about the feedback. So feedback has been solicited from staff, feedback has been solicited from
Parents.
parents and caregivers.
And then some from, I believe it went out to some high school students as well.
Like randomly selected high school
I'd have to
students?
look, I'd have to check with the high school to see how they sent it out. I think the request was for Mr. Meyer to send it out to students.
Okay, and I'd like to follow up on what someone else asked. Will the school committee be able to see the feedback that is gathered?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Multi-tiered systems of support. The Office of Teaching and Learning has established a multi-tiered systems of support design team. This team consists of educators representing a wide variety of roles and grade levels. Our partners at New Teacher Center have been an integral thought partner and facilitation partner with us as we work through this process. Our work on Tier 1 literacy curriculum and strategies is nested within this body of work. Literacy curriculum. Professional learning has begun for our new Tier 1 literacy curriculum with Fish Tank Learning. Our first Train the Trainer session for the district level leaders was on January 21st, and our first session for literacy specialists is on February 5th. A team of 10 educators visited Bradley Elementary in East Boston today to see the program in action, and another team of 10 educators will be visiting tomorrow. And we're excited to see our implementation plan come to life. That's through our Office of Teaching and Learning. Brookline CPAC Summer Camp Fair. On January 11th, the Brookline CPAC hosted its first ever summer camp fair at the Florida Ruffin Ridley School. And Lisa shares it was a resounding success, drawing great turnout from families and vendors. The fair featured programs that specialize in supporting children with special needs. 15 summer programs were in attendance, and the event showcased a diverse range of opportunities designed to cater to various ages and support needs. The program highlighted everything from academic enrichment to social skills development and therapeutic recreation. Families had the chance to speak directly with program representatives, ask questions, and find the perfect fit for their child's unique needs. The event created a welcoming environment for connection and resource sharing, and the enthusiasm and energy from both participants and program providers made the fair an invaluable resource for the special education community. And here are a few photos from the event from the various vendors that were there. And they even had a little play space for children who were in attendance. So we want to thank the CPAC and OSS for coordinating that. A few updates, general updates. There were questions around since we're talking about OSS, the student services position. That position has been posted. The deputy superintendent, I think it was posted January 9th and will be up through February 7th. So we generally hold our postings up about a month. A question was asked about the makeup of the interview team. That's written in policy, I think under G2, which says a principal, a member of senior cabinet, curriculum coordinator, and then 3 parents and 3 teachers generally. But given that this is a broader, the superintendent has discretion to add more members to that body. Generally with positions with which the school committee has statutory authority for appointment, a school committee member is not supposed to sit on that committee as such. That's what the policy says. But there are ways that we can get folks introduced that are needed there. So the committee itself hasn't been formed as of yet. I'll be doing that over the next 2 weeks. And certainly members of the student services team are very interested in participation, and I'm sure as well as CPAC and those types of groups.
A question on that?
Sure.
In terms of CPAC, then what would how are you looking at their involvement?
They would be members of the interviewing committee.
Okay, and would they be able to determine within their organization who they want to offer?
Yes, that's how that works, yeah.
They would get like a slot or 2, and then they'll come back to your.
Tell us
let you know
who their representative would be.
who their representatives will be. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Other questions around that? I think some of the other questions are better suited for Finance Subcommittee, but they may come up and we'll a little bit later, and we can address them there. That's OSS. For the Baker's principal spot has been posted as well, and I've sent out, I believe, a communication went out today to that community, inviting them or sharing the timeline as well as letting them know if they're interested in joining the committee, to submit their names or their information so that we can work with them on that. And I'll be posting Runkle soon as well. So we had, again, for context, both FRR and Baker had interim principals that were appointed in 2023. That appointment was for a 2-year period and now this is the juncture at which we need to search for the permanent principal. We know then that Donna Finnegan, who's been at Runkle for the past 5 years as the building principal, has shared that she's retiring. My goal is to run the position, hopefully get solid candidates for that, and run that process as well. So that will be 3 principal processes that we're running through at the moment. And the last part of the superintendent's update is there's certainly concern with, and I'll be sharing out a communication tomorrow with our community around recent changes to immigration officials and their abilities to come in schools. So very clearly that agents are not allowed in schools unless they have a judicial warrant as such. But I'll be sharing this information out with the community at large as well as our staff so that everyone's clear about what expectations and student protections are there. So no student should be released to any individual. No individual should be coming in our buildings. We have secured buildings, which is a great thing for us. But we want to make sure, especially during our transitional moments as well, that staff are aware and are taking appropriate safeguards with our students as such.
Is that communication going to staff exclusively or to the community as well, so that everyone is aware of the, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
The community, and to finish that, then Monday we have our building leadership meeting, our district leadership meeting, and town council and the town administrator will be joining to give additional updates to our district leaders so that we can make sure. And this is certainly emerging as we see lots of orders are coming out of Washington at this moment. And so we'll do our level best to keep up with the pace. We're also awaiting guidance from the Attorney General's office as well. And so, but until we have that guidance, this is the information that we're going to put out for our community. Okay.
Yeah, a question going back to the OSS position.
Sure.
So I just wanted to make sure I got the dates right. It was posted on the 9th?
The 7th
The
of
7th.
January,
Yeah, of January, right. And it does have a closing date?
on February 7th.
Till February 7th. And what would based on experience, what would the length of time be between February 7th and the time we're actually seeing candidates?
So my hope will be, and again, we have a lot going on in there. We have FRR, we have Baker as well. And so, and it's the same people, the same small cadre of people that are involved in many of those. So my goal would be to try to run an accelerated pattern if I could. But given that we have February break in there, that's going to be a challenge for us. And another question was about the interim, the possibility of an interim.
Well, again, I think the question, as I phrased it earlier, was if we found an amazing candidate and offered that person a position and they accepted, but they're working somewhere else, let's say, and they can start in whenever the beginning of the contract would be, let's say July 1st or something like that. So there's almost for sure going to be an interim period.
Right.
Where if Lisa's resignation was effective in March,
Yep.
and there's April and May and June for school and all the services and everything OSS does, I would imagine we have some kind of articulated plan for how to address 3.5 months of support. And, if it's not someone from the district, then they have to learn everything before she goes, and that's a tremendous amount of handoff.
It definitely is. And so, and when we brought Lisa on, it was a similar situation where our previous deputy left, I think, in June, and Lisa came on mid to late August as well. And so there was a period where we had directors who were certainly qualified that carried the load, but the summer period is very different than this. And so the goal would be to identify a short list of possibilities, reach out to them. I've been doing that as well, but that position, as it's codified in the committee, would then have to come to committee for a vote as well. And so all of that's going to be happening in very short order. So our goal is to have someone in place prior to the transition as well. And then the other thing is talking with the directors as well to get their input about what would make sense for an interim period as well. Because again, that notion of that much change in very short order is also hard. So I want to make sure that I have their thoughts and thinking as well.
Okay. And is it possible for us to know if there have been people who are interested in the position so far? I mean, it's out there almost 2-3 weeks now.
I think when I looked just before coming in, there may be, don't hold me to this number, that there may be, I think, 11 people that have applied.
Expressed interest, okay. All right, that's good to know. Thank you.
Oh, Val?
Val?
Thanks, Dr. Guillory. My understanding is that there are at least a few of similar jobs available in Eastern Mass. Is that accurate based on your mass meetings?
Ask that again, Val?
Sorry, I'm a little sick. That there are a few OSS assistant, superintendent, deputy superintendent type positions open in
Oh, I'm sure, yes.
metro area. Yeah,
Yep.
thank you.
Stephen?
Thanks. Two questions on this. One is, I know last time there was some issues around the communication with the school committee around the OSS position. Can you share maybe your plans for how you might communicate with the school committee around around the hiring process, especially if there's a need for an interim candidate, and especially if there's I mean, given that this is a school committee approved position, and there's a chance, of course, that the school committee would not approve the candidate. Can you just talk a little bit about how communications might proceed for this position?
Can you say more, Stephen, because I'm not remembering that.
Right. I think there was some confusion about what the process was for the administration to bring candidates before the school committee and when we would be updated by the administration for candidates for this position last time, if I remember correctly. So I just wanted to hear about the process for communicating with the school committee on this position. I may misremember.
Yeah, so two things we're looking at simultaneously. We're looking at the permanent position, which is what I just described to Jesse, that process for building a committee, and then looking at the possibility of what would be the interim process. So if we are able to identify a short list of interim candidates, we'd go through a truncated review process for those individuals and then bring an individual to school committee for consideration and recommendation. Realistically, that's going to have to be, I would say, realistically, around the 1st of March. The first week of March would be the designated time frame. That's still, but that's, with a person that's available right at the moment. And so that's the struggle point that we're in right now, is just given the shorter time frame around it. But the notion would be that we'd have to dock it or bring someone up pretty quickly. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, I think so. So likely the first the school committee would hear about this would be when it's docketed for school committee consideration of a specific candidate, or would there be an update about the process prior to then?
Oh, no, I'll definitely be keeping you updated along the way
Okay.
as well. So there may be, and so the tricky part is if there's a person, for example, that's applied for the permanent role that may be available now, and the interview committee is pleased with the individual, then do we just bring them in at this juncture rather than an interim, then a permanent? If that's not the case and the person they're selected is the preferred candidate, but they're not available until July, then that means I have to be thinking about the interim process as well. So it's both of those, and it's just the time crunch that we're in and the number of holidays that we have also in here as well. But we're shaking the tree leaves and reaching out to individuals that may have some interest or ability to help us out.
Okay. And related question is, are there any exit interview plans for Dr.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes,
Would you
yes.
share that?
And that came up, I think, at the last committee meeting as well. HR will engage in that process.
Is part of that process, are the results of the exit interview shareable with the school committee, or is that privileged information as per HR processes?
Well, I will, certainly the parts that are global for improving the system will certainly be taken and shared with, and I'll look at if there are any specific personnel matters that can't be made public, but will be addressed as such as well.
But
Okay, thank
Dr.
you.
Guillory, couldn't we look at that in executive session, given that it is our hire?
Possibly could as well.
Okay, thanks.
And I think Andy's,
Andy had hers.
yeah, and then Mariah, and then Helen. Andy,
Okay.
go ahead.
Am I next? Thank you. Yeah, just looking for more clarification on this process for selecting the permanent OSS deputy. So the committee that is being put together right now, Dr. Guillory, is the purpose of that committee to narrow it down to a list of finalists who would then be interviewed by a different and smaller group?
Yeah, so great clarifying question. So the process that I've used previously for deputy superintendents is to have an interview committee that does the first round or first body of work. Then they recommend, or they say these are the pros and the cons of each individual. From there, we do a second round of selected individuals. That's a different group. And again, it could be some overlap from the first group. And more than likely it will be, just given the size and scope of the bodies of work that are there. And then the superintendent is then charged with bringing a single candidate forward for the committee to consider. And so that's the process that we've used in these roles before.
Okay, so there's nothing in policy preventing a school committee member from participating in that second round, if that seemed appropriate.
I'll review it as such, but the goal would be to, as we've done with other positions, is have the committee meet the candidate and get to know the candidate prior to the formal announcement piece as well.
Okay, this is really to
So
follow
there'll be a
suggestion
form
that,
for
you
that.
know, is the school committee going to have any role in this process before it's narrowed down to a single candidate who, you know, it's then an up or down choice?
Yeah, I mean, I think given the need and the nature and the prominence of the role, I think we'll figure that part out, but make it available for you as well.
Thanks.
Okay, so I had a different question, but now I'm confused because isn't it a school committee hire?
It's a school committee.
So I'm really confused how the whole process can happen without school committee input before a final candidate. But I will leave that out there. That is a comment and not a question.
Your hire is when you vote them up or down.
Yeah, but
Right.
that's not a very pleasant process if you're going to get voted down. And I think that I would like to suggest that you completely accept the reality that we are going to have an interim and that we should not try and squeeze something together so quickly.
Yeah.
That we should just plan with the appropriate amount of time in place, and that means identifying an interim, likely within the current team, and having them step up and be that transition and glue, and not assuming we're going to be able to get, it would be an amazing rush to be able to get anybody into the position by March 15th, and I just feel like it's doing a disservice to the office and to the community, and to not put that interim in place and plan for a more extended time period that allows for appropriate transitions.
And that's the idea, but even with that interim still has to come to committee for approval. As such, it's not just me appointing as such, so.
Well, that's even more reason
to do it Right.
as soon as possible.
Exactly.
Wait for the pool of candidates.
Yeah.
That's even more reason to do it as soon as possible and not wait for the pool of candidates to identify their availability.
Mm-hmm. With Helen.
The one thing I want to caution us all about, I know people are interested in this position and want to make sure that we get the right person, as does the administration. We also don't want to scare away candidates. Oftentimes, candidates need the privacy because they're usually, the good candidates are in positions where they're very valued. And so we have to be careful not to scare away the good candidates. And so it's a balancing act is what I'm trying to say. I've been on these committees before, and believe me, you have to be careful, and people do leave, especially if they don't think they're going to get the job, or there's, 3 people out there, it becomes kind of complicated.
Well, just to add, they also are not going public on their search. So anyway, it is a balance. Because we want to attract the best candidates, but we don't want them to be fearful that that will go public and then they lose their current job, but they don't get this one. So it is a balance. And so I trust that the superintendent will help us get through that, so we can.
Especially because of the open meeting law. And if there's more than 4 of us in a room together or a committee together, that becomes.
Yeah, I was just going to add then to second on what Mariah said, that when I was talking about articulating a transition plan in terms of knowing that and following up on what Helen just said, if we're looking for an individual who's currently employed, most likely they're not going to be available until they finish the current year. And so it's 99% we're sure that we're going to be getting, that we're looking for a person who's going to start in the summer. And that means that we definitely need to get somebody from inside to help to be ready on March 16th, So that's, I think, what school committee would like to see is that plan come to fruition pretty quickly. Because that even allows us, essentially, if we're not too worried about finding a permanent person by March 16th, we have a little more time to do it very, very carefully and judiciously and continue the engine of OSS running as well. Until such time as we have a permanent person.
Okay, is that it?
That's it.
Hillary? Thank you so much. Mariah, are you going to lead us through our budget and
I'm going to
finance?
start,
Okay.
and I think I'll turn it over to Susan later on. And I might actually flip around the last 2 things so that I could finish all of my part before we go to your part, Susan. Okay, I see a thumbs up. So the first item in finance is discussion and possible vote on FY26 fees for BEEP, Brookline Early Education Program. So this was discussed at finance last week. And Betsy, thank you so much for my handy notes here. I will just say that we had a lot of conversation about thinking about the all-in costs of BEEP and considering the changes that have been made from FY24 to the current year FY25 when the program has now gone to full day. And we had done a first analysis last year of a revision of the tuition at that point, and we reconsidered it more fully with additional information that was provided to us. The memo that you all have is this one, which is the one we received at finance. And then additional information was provided by Susan over the weekend, which is this piece of paper with the all-in costs of BEEP and the various sources of funding. And so the things that we talked about where it relates to the BEEP charges were to, and this was the Finance Committee voting 3 in favor and 1 opposed with 0 abstentions, was to increase BEEP tuition by 8% each year for the next 3 years. Staff presented to us 3 ranges of costs. Those are on the back side of this chart. However, the committee noticed that the 5% increase that was proposed was essentially it was barely covering the base program. It did not do anything to address the other substantial costs of the program that are provided to you all, particularly benefits on the second sheet that we received over the weekend. And so we recommended to the full committee to increase BEEP tuition by 8% each year for the next 3 years. There was also a discussion about whether or not to reduce the number of financial aid seats, which, if you recall, several years ago was increased from 20 to 40. However, the data that we received in the memo shows that although there are other programs in town which are offering more financial assistance, which is wonderful, and there's many more, or I'll say there are more opportunities for students who need financial assistance to access early education. The financial aid numbers that you see on this table make clear that at least for BEEP, there is still a strong financial aid. And so the committee voted to maintain the number of tuition assistance seats at 40 and not reduce it. And then lastly, on the back, there is also a BEEP extended day program, and which was new last year, if you recall, because Schools for Children stepped away from the district due to going from a half day to a full day program. And so we voted to increase the extended day tuition by $200 per month in each of the next 3 years. Again, our conversation was looking at the cost to deliver the program and also considering the benefits that are accrued to that same program. So we looked at bringing that cost closer to covering the annual cost per pupil. And we also discussed revisiting that if, for example, the principal of BEEP could increase the program such that the cost per pupil, there was a different number in future years. And so she's certainly interested in that and looking at that as well. But at least for the upcoming year, it would increase to $1,000 a month. And so I think the motion that the subcommittee made to the full committee was to, as I said, recommend that the school committee increase BEEP tuition by 8% each year for the next 3 years, maintain the number of tuition seats at 40, and increase BEEP extended day tuition by $200 per month in each of the next 3 years to $1,000 per month in 26, $1,200 per month in 27, and $1,400 per month in 28.
Just a quick question.
Well, you need to get a second first.
Well, I was just reading the motion. I don't think I made it. I'm just saying what it was.
Then
Yeah.
I'd like to comment on it. I would actually like for us to go back to the initial tuition recommendation. I think going up to 8% respectfully. I know you guys discussed it and I understand the numbers. However, there are two pieces, I think, in this. One is the parents' ability. I mean, these are probably parents who are stressed the most in terms of tuition with young children. Also, I think that if we do it logically for 3 years, the 5%, 5%, 5%, people can plan and know what's going to come. The third piece is that I don't know if people read in the paper, but the Trust Center got a $450,000 ARPA grant from the town and said they were going to be having 38 full scholarship students. So I think that will also cut into some of the students who might apply here. Their timing is the same time as our program. And so that would be my recommendation.
Well, I'll make the motion of the committee,
Okay.
and then we can go from there. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. Now, more discussion? I just have, Mariah, could you tell me what the extended day, what the hours are for the extended day? Do you know that?
I believe it's 2:30 to
5:30,
5:30
same as our
or
extended
6.
days.
Yeah, it's
So it's-
something like that.
It's 3 hours a day.
5 days a week.
5 days
Where do
a
we-
week.
Yep.
Is it an extra hour for the day that's early dismissal on
Yeah.
Friday?
Two-
So it's 16,
Oh, yes, yep, 16.
16 hours a week.
I mean, I'd like to make a friendly, well, an amendment, it's not necessarily friendly, to substitute 5% for 8%.
Do you want to do that now, or do you want to wait and see if the motion fails? Because then we just have to do we have to vote the substitute motion, I guess. I mean, it's up to you, I guess, but yeah.
I can,
Okay, Stephen, and hold on to that, Helen. so
Yes.
I heard that.
I was not at the last subcommittee, the finance subcommittee meeting, and I'd like to request some more elementary discussion of this matter. Would you mind restating the motion, please, Mariah? And would you mind also restating the rationale for the motion?
Sure. So if you look at the back of the memo that you got,
Mhm.
there's 3
The memo is what is the letter to the Finance Subcommittee from Dr. Givens and Principal Aberhart.
Correct.
Okay.
On the back of that page, there were 3 different numbers provided: 3%, 5%, and 8%. Staff landed in the middle, but just between 3 and 8 was 5, and they chose the 5% number to recommend to us. The discussion at the committee was that essentially the 5% does not, it barely covers the cost of the program, which if you look at the other document that we received, the revolving fund expenses in FY26 are estimated at $3,047,000. And however, that does not include the classroom capacity, which is at $762,000, nor does it include the benefits that are accrued to the educators paid from the revolving fund, which is another $1.185 million. And so you can see that because all of those expenses, particularly benefits, are reducing, as we've had a whole bunch of conversation, basically reducing the expenses to the extent we can have the revolving fund more accurately represent the true costs of running the gen ed portion of the program. That helps the overall school district, and it more accurately allocates the costs to where they're being born, where they're being generated, I should say.
And so what is the motion?
So the motion is the 8%, which is of those 3 options at the bottom. The 8% is there. So it's the difference between $16,740 per year or $16,275 per year. So it's around
$100.
Yeah, 450 or something like that. And then the second part of the motion is staff recommended, again, to be able to increase tuition paying seats to reduce the number of tuition assistance seats. However, the data shown reflects that there is still a strong demand for tuition assistance seats. Because of that, the committee said we understand the desire, but until there is actually a data, sort of evidence showing that there is reduced demand for those seats, we don't want to reduce the number that we hold aside.
So this will allow us to maintain the same level of non-tuition paying students, or to expand that number?
It would, I don't think we talked about expanding that number, but the data, we didn't talk about it, but the data also doesn't, like, it shows that for the past couple of years, they've been slightly under the 40 number as well. If you see the data showing in that table on the front page, shows 38 in the current year, 37 last year, 38 the year before. So they're not quite using the 40 seats, but they're not 5 seats less
I'm
than
just
that.
trying to understand. So this allows them to better meet costs while maintaining the same level, roughly.
Correct.
And there's still excess demand for non-tuition paying students.
Correct.
Okay, thanks, Mariah.
Yep.
You had just, where's the revenue side? This is all cost, like, I see 9 million.
So the revenue is, well, there's the budget from the town, and then the revolving fund expenses. I don't think that Susan
There's
showed.
federal money that comes in too.
That's, the grants that are there. And then,
I guess my question is, this view doesn't allow one to see why the 3 or the 5, the 8%, how it's going to affect, like, either creating a deficit or providing a, overflow.
if you look at the 3271 compared to the 3,047,000, you'll see that, or the 3364, we create, basically, if we go to 5%, we're generating 3.2 million
Of revenue. Okay.
of revenue, and then you have to compare that against the expenses shown on the separate page. And so we would be generating slightly more, another 100,000 that then could be used to look at other expenses, for example, the benefits costs.
So the 3, 5, and 8 are to address the revolving fund expenses.
Correct, this is only the revolving
Oh,
fund.
okay.
Yes, because this is fees, so the fee is tuition, we have to set the tuition.
So,
Helen?
thank you. So one of the things I think we need to keep in mind is this is a mandated program that we need to provide. BEEP for special ed students. We do choose to make this a balanced program. There are some schools that have 49% of the kids in there with IEPs and, 51% without, typically developing. We tend to do 25% with IEPs, approximately. I'm not, this isn't true for every single class, but approximately 25% for the kids who are at risk, whether they're ELL students or students who, haven't had any kind of education. And then 50% of typically developing students, so that you get a balanced model. And because of that, it costs us. But it's also an investment, in my opinion. It's an investment in our students who we are going to have throughout, and who hopefully we can somehow get a return on this investment by not having special ed costs later on. And it's been shown that early childhood is something that is critical, especially for low-income students, for kids who are English language learners, for kids with IEPs. Having that base and having that understanding makes a huge difference.
Staff talked about the inclusion program specifically, if you look at the bottom of the memo underneath the table on page 1. And so it talks about what the appropriate ratio of students is. And if you look in the second paragraph, basically, because the program this year, for example, it says we have 40 students on IEPs enrolled in the full inclusion program. To support the 40 students on IEPs, we would need 60 peers to form our early intervention special education program, the peers that you were mentioning, Helen. And so the total enrollment associated with this program would be 100 of the 283 students enrolled in BEEP this year. And so I think that the data shows that that there are many students who are that we are providing it more students in excess of the model, the special education.
Oh, yes.
Right.
No, we
so-
do that.
Yeah.
I know that, and it's important. I think we do the right thing, and that's what's really critical.
So here's what I'm struggling with. If I had a child next year at 5% increase, that'd be 16,275 plus if I went to full daycare, the extended day, it'd be another 12,542 on top of that.
12,542.
Well, it says annual cost per pupil.
Where are you? Sorry,
Under extended day.
no, that's not the annual charge per student. That's the cost to the district. It's the fee. Right now they're paying $8,000 per
800 a
student.
month.
Yep, which is times 10 months. And the proposal is that they would pay 10,000. So we would still be losing $2,500 per student, which is
Okay, so, but the cost to the family, so if it was 1,000 a month, it's 10,000.
correct. It's 10,000.
So now we're up to 26,000.
Right. There was a
10-month program. The program is wonderful. I'm
yeah.
not-
The staff did
not doubting that for
the
a
staff
moment.
did the comparison against other programs,
Yeah.
and it was not out of the
Out of the range.
range.
Okay. I just think going forward, we have to think about, I don't know, I mean, it's so expensive for our families. I don't know how we get around that, but it just, $26,000 a year for a 10-month program, I mean, it's not a year, a 10-month program.
I hear you. I mean, I think that I think this is the problem that we are experiencing across PSB is the issue of cost, and I'm not sure what to
I don't know what the,
say to you. This is a conversation we're going to have 5 more times in the next hour if we ever finish this one.
Yeah,
So
sorry, yeah.
this was supposed to be 5 minutes. You guys are
I'm
messing up
sorry,
my track
it's my
record for-
fault, Mariah. I take full responsibility.
Carolyn?
Thanks. Just to clarify from what Suzanne was just saying, so we have moved this to, BEEP is now full day in that it mirrors the PSB day, roughly 8 to 2:30. Extended day is up till 6 or something.
5:30 or so.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly, yeah.
So just to be super clear on that, thank you. So I guess my main reason for supporting Margaret's recommendation and what was voted at subcommittee, which was the 8% increase, is just obviously preschool and childcare is expensive, and that is a separate issue. I think the committee, school committee, before I was on it, talked about comparing BEEP to other programs, and I don't know that it's more, but we want it to be sustainable. Like, that's how I'm looking at this, is that to sustain this program and not be dipping into the reserves in the revolving fund. That's why I would support the motion as recommended by Margaret, and voted at the subcommittee.
No, we didn't vote. Oh, the way you voted at the subcommittee.
The way the
You vote-
subcommittee voted.
That wasn't Margaret's recommendation. We voted 8%, Margaret recommended 5.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay. And I thought she was,
Margaret and
maybe
Susan.
she was recommending, maybe I took that as a recommendation, or she was talking also about the reducing of the seats. I also just have a quick question. Full IEP seats, does that mean those are free to those? Okay, so that's fully subsidized, and then financial aid?
Well, it varies. It varies.
Okay,
according
varies.
to- Yeah.
And I don't see a relation to the asterisk there, but, so financial aid is some kind of scale. The IEP seats are it's not need-based, financial need-based.
Correct.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Is it
Okay.
possible to do a gradual increase? I mean, could we do like a 5, 6, and 8, or?
There's a motion on the floor. Can we
There
just-
is.
Like, can we vote, and then if it fails, we move on?
Okay.
I'm just hoping, like,
Friendly amendment first, I
Okay.
think. So,
can we vote that then, and then move on? I have like kind of a hard stop.
Okay.
yeah,
So-
okay. Stephen, you need to speak now?
I just want to know why Margaret recommended 5 over 8.
Susan's here, so maybe she could respond for both of them, since that was their joint recommendation. You need to unmute.
Not on.
It's got to be green.
Okay. So the recommendation was really twofold. It was 5% and the reduction of 5 seats. And so the combination of that, was basically equal to 8.
Right.
So by going with 8 and preserving the seats, financially, it's the same dollar value.
Basically nets
Thank
to the
you.
same.
Yeah.
Okay, Helen, you have a friendly amendment. I don't know if it's friendly, but you have an amendment.
Yes, I have an amendment to go to
You wish to
5%,
still put that forward?
but I need a second.
You do need a second, yes. Do we have a second? Okay, we don't. So Andy?
Well, I would second that if it were coupled with the rest of staff's original recommendation, which was to have the 5%, but also reduce the number of financial aid seats by 5 per year.
Well, then you would have to change your amendment.
Right. So that incorporates Helen's motion, but it goes beyond it.
I'll
and that
accept
goes
that
back to the
friendly
original
amendment.
staff
I'll
recommendation.
accept that friendly amendment because I did see the article where there are 38 students who will be accommodated at the trust center. So that would be fine.
So now we're Andy's amendment, and you've seconded Andy's?
Yes.
So I guess we should vote on that.
Just to clarify, it's not reducing 5 seats per year, it's just at what time?
Was it? I thought it was 5 per year.
Can you?
I'm pretty
I didn't
sure
hear
it's
that.
5 per year. Yes, it says that somewhere here.
5% per year and 5 seats per year.
Yeah. So it would go to 25 at the end of 3 years.
And I'm sorry, Mariah. My question there is, if we're talking about, what would be, if financial aid is not a set amount, is there a dollar amount associated? Was that sort of like, was it presented with an amount, a dollar amount in the reduction of financial aid?
So I think I put that on the sheet.
It is. It's in.
77,000?
Yeah, it's 77,000.
Yeah, so by reducing the 5 seats, we estimated it would be 77,000
Each time,
each, yeah.
so for a total of 77 times
Right.
3.
So if you take the 77 plus the revenue for a 5%, it's actually pretty equal to an 8%.
So you're
So we were
actually
trying to give you an
reducing the
option.
revenue even lower from what is shown in the sheet if we are,
Okay.
yeah.
So help me out here. I think that we need to vote on the amendment,
Yeah,
and then, depending on that vote, we vote on the
correct.
original.
Yes.
Okay. So we're now voting on a 5% increase over 3 years with understanding there'll be a reduction of 5 of tuition each year.
I believe we're voting on whether to make that the motion, right? Or not taking the actual vote on the substance.
Correct. We take the vote on whether or not to make that the motion. Then whatever the result of that is, we have to vote it again, whether it's the 8 and 0 or the 5 and 5.
I'm not sure I follow, but I will just do what you say.
Okay. Andy's right.
Of course, that's why it's chair. So do people know what they're voting on? We're voting on the 5% now,
No, we're voting on 5% and 5 seats.
and 5 seats.
Yes,
right.
to reduce by 5 seats per
Right.
year and to take 5% increase per year.
Okay.
Per
Are we,
Right, and the extended day proposal staying the same. We accepted staff's proposal on that, so.
so we're voting on that, or we're voting to make
Whether or
that
not
the
to
amendment?
substitute whether or not to substitute that for the
Whether that's
motion.
going to be the main motion?
Yes.
Understood, thank you.
Jesse,
Yes.
Sarah,
No.
Mariah.
No.
Wait, I'm really confused. Okay. Helen,
Yes.
Carolyn,
No.
Stephen,
No.
Andy,
Yes.
and Val.
No.
And I actually vote yes. So,
That was 5 to 4, where the 8s and 0s got it.
I think the 8's got it.
yeah, so now we vote on the
3.
And we vote on the original.
Wait a minute.
original.
1, 2,
Yeah, it was 1, 2,
3,
Val.
5. Yeah.
Okay, now we're voting on the original, which is an 8% increase for the next 3 years.
number of tuition paying, or tuition, financial aid seats.
Okay, Jesse,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Mariah.
Yes.
Yes, Helen,
Abstain.
Carolyn,
Yes.
Stephen,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Val,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes as well. Okay, thank you. Mariah, do we need to do a time check here? Do you need to,
I don't have a choice. We have to keep going.
well, what I was going to offer, if you wanted to, is we could go to, like, our public speakers, are they here?
No, that won't help me.
That won't help
No,
you?
no, we need to go, the only way through is through. Okay. So the next item on the agenda is discussion and possible vote on non-aligned salaries for principals. So we also discussed this at finance. You have a memo, a separate memo here. We got data presented by Susan Givens on high school principals, middle school principals, and elementary school principals. And the committee voted very similarly to what the memo shows. We voted to increase the pre-K to 8 principal salary range from 160 to 170 instead of 158 to 168, and I'll explain why in one moment. And then we voted the recommendation of 185 to 195 for the high school principal. And the reason why we increased it is because if you look at the salaries in the table, the last table on page 2, those are current year salaries. The 140, you'll see like the Unit B director and coordinators and the assistant principals, and those have another 2.75% increase for the next fiscal year. And so, again, like there has to be a certain amount of distance between the different reporting levels, and so, as described in the memo. And so the committee recommended, I think unanimously, am I remembering right? I know it's here. Yep. Yes, unanimously 400 to recommend the 160 to 170 range and the 185 to 195 range. So I'm going to make that motion. Thank you. Thanks, Helen. We're going to make up time on this one.
Any conversation, Jesse?
Yeah, I guess my question is, how does this, I mean, I see the numbers for other communities. Are these communities also under the same or similar financial pressures that our district is? That is to say, if we're
Funny
looking
you
at.
should mention that. Go ahead, yeah. Well, like Lexington, we know is one of, if I recall correctly, is one of the communities that we've heard. I think Sarah shared with us some of the financial pressures. As far as I know, Newton is as well. I don't know about all of these. Do you know any more, Susan, about that? Yeah, yeah. I don't know if we have documentation. The one thing I would say though too is, there was an extensive conversation at school committee about some of the, the salaries that we have and ensuring that we can retain people. So I think that if we're looking at retention and looking at stability in the district, making sure that we have the ability to pay people in a way that allows them to feel valued and to continue to have that motivation to be a building leader, for example, when going one step down might or so might actually mean almost the same pay. So we really have to, these are actions that we should feel good about taking because they help ensure retention, stability, and internal growth.
I guess the second part of my question then is how are we going to pay for it? Because other suggestions are to potentially freeze salaries until we can get ourselves out of a deficit situation. Because there's no other place where are we going to get the money from? It's like we were saying, where are we going to get the money for BEEP? We just voted an increase, but we can't go out to the community next year and say we need, I don't know what this percentage, by the way, these numbers don't tell you necessarily what the 2.75% or 3% raises are, but we can't go out to like Coolidge Corner and ask everybody 3%, help us cover our 3%, which is a very large sum of money over the entire district. Do we know what that amount is, by the way? In other words, if we go up that amount totally?
Yes, it's at the very bottom of the memo. It's slightly different, so because we increased the range to 160 to 170 for the pre-K to 8 principals, but the delta
No, it's minor.
is small. That's right.
Right, but I'm saying overall for the district, all these salaries going up by that amount.
What, those are contractual. All the Unit B salaries are contractual, so that is,
What's
that's
that?
The total is 104,000 approximately,
correct. Yep.
what the increase would be.
I will just say, if you do not keep up, and we have freezes, then it will come to haunt us even years down the road. So then suddenly, instead of a 2% increase, they're going to need an 8% to catch up to our competition and our comparables. And this is a typical list of who we look at.
We added this year, after a conversation earlier at Finance, we added Milton and, what was the other one we added?
Natick?
Was it Natick we added?
I don't,
To our peers? We added Milton. I'm trying to remember the second one that we added. Natick and Milton, okay. So we have used this peer district, and then Susan suggested some additional peer communities that we looked at. We had a whole conversation at Finance about this before adding them.
Stephen, and then I think we'll go to a vote.
I just want to say that I think principal retention and stability is critical, but so is Jesse's line of questioning. The last I heard, we're facing a gigantic budget deficit. Can someone help me understand why we're making this decision now before I understand you have a hard stop, Mariah, but before we've had the finance update and before we understand the size of the deficit that we have to trim? And we're going to be faced with a lot of very
Well,
unappealing.
you don't have to vote it. I mean,
So-
Is there an
If
option to
everybody-
instead to postpone this vote until we've fully heard the current state of the budget?
Stephen, if I may?
Yeah.
If everybody remembers, our teachers got a 2.75% increase this year in September. We are now in January. I assume this is retroactive for the year?
this is for next year. This is
For
not for
next
the current year. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not remembering if we gave any increase this year to our principals. We did? Yeah? Okay.
Carolyn?
Thank you, Suzanne. Just for clarification, in that second to last paragraph, the total increase to the budget for principal compensation 104,369, is that the high school K-8 and the assistant principals, not the assistant principals?
This is only principals.
Okay. So even though assistant principals is in this table, we're not voting on assistant principals?
That's to show you principals versus their supervisors. So
Thank
it's
you,
giving
sorry,
sort
because
of
assistant principals are
the
unit based,
threshold
sorry.
is- Yeah.
Got it, thank you, thank you.
Okay, let's take a vote. Did we lose Sarah?
I'm sure she'll be back in a moment.
Okay, we'll come back to it. Jesse?
Abstain.
Mariah?
Yes.
Helen?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Stephen?
Abstain.
Andy?
Yes.
Val?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Thank you.
Thank you all. It's okay with you, Susan, right, if I swap things around? Okay, so I forwarded to you all, well, so let me take 2 steps back on this one, to my chagrin. So we, if you recall, at our last full school committee meeting, had a discussion about the statement of work, but you all had not seen the statement of work. So then I forwarded the statement of work, and we were going to discuss it at finance anyway, and so we had a robust conversation last Wednesday at finance about the statement of work. At that meeting, multiple school committee members were present and were opining on the topic. And there were several members of the community who were in attendance who expressed concern that we might be violating open meeting law by having other members of school committee there and participating in the discussion. And all I will say about that is I'm going to park most of that for new business, but we're bringing it back tonight either way. We were going to anyway, because when I heard that conversation, I said, we had originally talked about doing a straw poll because we were trying to go back to the vendor to get an updated quote. When I understood that there was a concern about open meeting law, I thought, let's make sure to bring it back to the committee so that the vote is ratified either way and we can sort of redo this conversation. In the meantime, because Brookline never sleeps, we got some, as I forwarded to you all earlier today, we received some feedback from the chair of the advisory committee that some of the members of advisory committee had some additional questions that they thought our statement of work might benefit from considering whether or not to include those. And so I forwarded those to you all earlier today for your consideration. I apologize, I got them late last night and just wasn't able to send them until when I did. But I also sent and I think you'll have this, I put my own comments on it, so you just got it. And so the top is the previously discussed draft revised statement of work from January 15th finance. And then the bullets in bold below, the questions are the ones that came from advisory, and then I just put my notes on the side. And my notes are not meant to be determinative in any way. It just helps me to write it down, and I thought it might help other people if you hadn't had the full chance to consider them. And so I don't know how exactly we want to proceed to this, other than I think people could recommend where they want to add things, or I could go through my quick sort of notes on what I think we might want to add. And I just want to say too, thanks to advisory for engaging and sharing their thoughts with us.
And I think that this was touched upon at the finance subcommittee meeting, that the client here is going to be us and also the audit committee, or not also the
School
audit
committee in
committee?
partnership with audit committee. And
Okay.
audit committee is meeting on Monday at 9 a.m., I believe, to
Okay.
talk about this. Yes.
Okay, and so you're looking to sort of, well,
At this point, I was looking to get a vote from the full committee to ratify what happened at finance, and now I'm saying, do any of these questions speak to people? A couple of them do to me, and do we want to make any more tweaks while we have this sort of last bite at the apple, which at this point I feel like, is it the last bite at the apple? Or
Right.
will there be other bites? Who
because in
knows? But-
parallel, the audit committee is going to meet and presumably perhaps have their own input and might come back.
I don't know what's going to
Okay,
happen in
fine.
audit. I don't want to,
Okay,
yeah.
perfect.
Yes.
Andy?
Yeah, thanks, Suzanne. Before we get too much into the substance of this, I did want to ask, what is the purpose of the document that we're working on, this scope of work? Because we just got in like a proposal from CBiz, which is the successor firm to Powers and Sullivan. They're the ones that we asked for to consider doing this, and I mean, they delineate a scope of work that is not exactly what we sent them. It's kind of pretty much based on what we sent them, but in a somewhat stripped down form. And I assume that whatever contract we sign is going to embody that and not whatever tweaks we might be making to a sort of more substantial document here.
So you're saying we should be editing the CBiz statement of work as opposed to ours? I felt like theirs was pretty close to me.
It's close, but it doesn't, like where we have 3 sentences, they sort of have 1.
Well, it's Susan's coming to the mic, so
Yeah,
it
okay.
seems like she might have a thought or an answer.
Yes, I think there was 2 parts to what I had sent to them based on our conversation at Finance Committee.
I'm not sure you're
One-
getting picked up by the mic. You might want to go a little closer.
Is this better?
Yeah.
Oh. So there was 2 items that I thought were called out at the meeting. One, to send the new scope of work over to them, and 2, to see if there was ways in which they could reduce the price. So I think what they returned to us was a response to those 2 requests. So if we're going to expand the scope of work, we can expect that the price is going to go up from what it is. But I think if you're going to get the audit done, you should get the audit that you want done, right? I mean, so.
Sorry, Susan, so they didn't actually provide us a price for the scope that we had at finance?
Yes.
I'm sorry, yes,
Maybe-
they did or
did,
they did
right?
not?
Yeah,
did.
no, I thought they did. They just, they were more maybe efficient with their wording.
Yeah, they reworded it, but
Right. So
for
the-
example, it does
their
include the
proposal-
5
sorry,
questions.
Their estimate is $40,000 to $45,000
Yeah.
for a scope of work that is essentially what came out of finance, but the wording is just stripped down. Like I said, where we have 3 sentences, they tend to have 1.
Right, and so that's my question, Susan, is are they gonna adjust the 3 sentences for $40,000, or are they gonna address their 1 sentence?
Well,
So do we not have a price, I guess, for our full submission?
I think they were attempting to capture what you had requested in 3 sentences with 1 sentence. And if you feel that, I'm happy to explore with them to ensure that the essence of what you wanted in your 3-sentence version was, their understanding of what they'd be providing us for services.
Let me just read we can take the mystery out of the 1 sentence versus the 3 in 2 seconds. This is what I'll just read it real quick. With respect to the engagement, CBiz would review internal controls, processes, and procedures related to OSS, including budget practices, hiring protocols, procurement, contract and requisition processes, grant administration, overall financial management within the department. We will seek to determine the following. They have our 5 questions there, more or less. I would say they're pretty close. They just sort of reworded them, as Andy said. And then to accomplish this, we will perform walkthroughs of processes scheduling and conduct select interviews to confirm processes and identify controls and control mechanisms, review any existing standard operating procedures for update opportunities, and/or suggest the elements that would constitute an adequate procedural document, gain an understanding of the organizational and reporting structure, including budgeting and planning, create a risk and control matrix that identifies any control gaps, and report out on all findings and recommendations. So the deliverables are the risk and control matrix and the report. I still feel like we should work from our draft statement of work, and if we need to go back to them and sort of say, please add this word, or you know what, the committee's concerned that your wording is a little bit different, and can you affirm that you're still going to meet our document even if you've reworded it? I think we can do that. I think that the question in front of us today is, do we want to add any of these bullets? And I'm going to put my own, again, I'm trying to move us ahead. So my feeling was that bullets 2 and 3 could be added to question 3 to essentially bulk up question 3. And it was my opinion that most of the other ones were already contained within the statement of work or addressed by making the tweaks under bullets 2 and 3.
Bullets 2 and 3 of
Stephen?
the AC.
Yes, the bullets 2 and 3, not numbers 2 and 3. So like the one that says, are there controls that meet the best practices criteria that do exist? And I was thinking, if you look at our original questions, 1 and 2 had these follow-ups, sort of, are there internal controls, processes, procedures that could be established? But 3 didn't have that. And so I think if we essentially add a parallel question to 3 that bulks up, like, that addresses bullet 2, because they were basically saying, well, what should we be doing specifically for that? It's not just what were they, but what is the problem? Like, what should we be doing? And they want the recommendation part, which is in question 1 and question 2, but wasn't in question 3.
Helen?
Mariah, it seems to me at the end, they put that piece in at the end of their proposal that you just read, where they to provide internal, I forget what it was they said, but that last sentence seemed to repeat that, but maybe I'm wrong.
Sorry, I have to pull it open again.
In the-
I guess I think it makes less sense for us to try and cross-reference CBIZ against us. I think that we should put the document to them that we want rather than doing that. And
So do you think the document we want is the SOW that you have at the top?
well, I think that we could add a sentence to question 3, or a question. If you look at bullet 2,
Yeah.
see how I said we could add a follow-up question like what internal controls, procedures, processes could be established or modified to address these issues, meaning the issues of communication. I'm sorry, the issues of delay, interruption, or non-payment of special education services. And then the next bullet down below that is advisory suggested adding, were the FY24 and 25 deficits substantially impacted by the absence of these controls? And I think we could add that as well. And those would be the only 2 changes I would make, because
What about the next to last bullet?
because that one, I feel like if we add the 2 changes I'm proposing, it actually addresses that bullet. I think that next to last bullet and bullet 2 and 3
Yeah, if you change the beginning of the second bullet, are there controls, to enumerate the controls, then yes, I would agree with that. I think their idea of coming out positive and say, here are the list of controls that would really be good to have in place. That would
So as opposed to saying what internal controls, say
Yes.
enumerate
Yeah,
controls.
I-
Yeah, that's
I
fine.
think that's-
That's fine. Yep.
And when we're talking about controls, Mariah, are we talking about OAF controls, OSS control? What are we talking about when we say control?
All PSB, if you look at the very first line of the statement of work, it's review all PSB internal controls. It's related to OSS, but it's not only focused on OSS controls, procedures, and controls, processes, and procedures.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're looking at OAFs as well, with respect to.
Right. So,
Mariah,
okay,
would you like to move?
do people understand what I'm even suggesting? Are people on, okay, so then in that case, I just want to make sure, like, because
Yeah, I
I'm
think we
going
got
so
it.
quick. Okay, so I would make the recommendation to add, enumerate the internal, I can't even speak anymore, Jesse. Enumerate what internal controls, et cetera, could be established or modified to address these issues, and then were the FY24 and 25 deficits substantially impacted by the absence of these controls? So we would add those to question 3.
Well, actually, the third bullet is just a yes, no answer, and that's not going to get us too far. I mean, if we assume so, we could just say, how were they? If we know the controls are out of alignment, or that we lack certain controls that would have helped us. So maybe we should change just the were, which is a yes, no answer, to how. Explain how it happened. They're going to have the information. That's what the audit's purpose is.
But how assumes that it was a yes,
Correct.
right?
Should we ask for both?
How about, and if so, how?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we have several hands up. I don't know which one went up first. I'll do Stephen and then Andy.
Thanks. So Mariah, I agree with your suggestion of just including that. 2 questions. One, in Lisa's resignation letter, she alleged 2 things. 1, a hostile work environment, and 2, financial mismanagement. It's my assumption that the appropriateness of communications is covered. It covers whether or not there is a hostile work environment. Do we want to make that more explicit, or do you think that's sufficient? Do the auditors know that that's supposed to cover that claim?
So I would defer this to Linus, but I would expect that that's a personnel matter and not covered under this.
So it's not our intention to investigate that with this audit?
That's a question I wouldn't answer, but again,
Well, I guess I posed that to the entire school committee then. Is it not our interest in investigating that matter with this audit?
I don't think it goes with this audit necessarily, Stephen. I think that it's a legal employment matter that would be investigated most probably by an employment lawyer or town council in consultation with
Okay, then
staff.
I do want to follow up on that question then. So what is the process for investigating that?
I'll speak up about that one. I've been in touch with our labor council about how to handle that, but it's not something I think we can discuss in open session.
Okay, and then my second question is about the Dr. O'Connell's allegations of financial mismanagement. Are we intending to investigate that with this audit?
yes, this audit is specifically to investigate that. Like, these questions refer to specific allegations that were made both in that letter and in other venues.
It seems to me that this investigates mostly questions about whether there is sufficient processes in place. And her allegations of financial mismanagement suggest that there are accounting numbers that are off, not just processes. Does that
And that's
seem right?
referred to in question 4. Are there charges allocated that would be better allocated
That's
to another
right.
unit?
That's an allocation question, not a calculation question. Are we not intending to validate any of the calculations made in the process of?
Calculations are sums of allocations.
Not entirely. Allocations are where the charges are being where charges are being brought to, what accounts, not
Right.
whether the sums add up.
Well, in my mind, they're not different, but okay.
To mine they are.
You're saying that theoretically OSS has $20 allocated to their account and someone else is presenting
in the last memo that we
$100.
received from Dr. O'Connell, she cited different amounts of funds that the IDEA grant offered to us, and that it was not reflected in the budgets that she saw. That suggests that it could have been an allocation issue, or it could have been an issue that does not have to do with allocations.
That's
So,
budget management.
okay, so it's not
That's
clear to
budgeting.
me.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
It could be where they're put in the budget, or it could be how they're how they're calculated as a result of expenditures. Right? I work with budgets too.
Susan, do you want to comment to this? But my feeling is, I feel like this is covered. Like, whether you're talking
It's
about
not
it
clear to me that it's covered. is what
or
I'm-
a
I hear what you're saying, Mariah. I'm
overall
saying
financial management issue,
I
like,
hear
it's
that.
covered under overall financial management.
Right. What I'm saying is it's not explicit to me that it's covered. And do we want to add something explicitly saying that the auditor needs to validate that the accounting is correct, not just the allocations?
I think that my concern is.
Your mic is off, Mariah.
Glad it was off. My concern, and this was something, I framed question 5 pretty carefully about this, because I think we are talking about a broad audit and not a forensic audit. We are not going to, and as far as I know, we are not having this audit firm go through individual transactions. That would be incredibly expensive and time consuming. So question 5 says, does the auditor believe that the cost increase represents a broadly accurate picture of the district's special education costs? Because what you are asking for, and we've talked about this by email, is a forensic audit to the best of my knowledge, and that is not what we are doing here or proposing to do here.
Okay, so does it necessarily have to preclude them looking at a sampling of them? So if there are some specific accounts that we have heard that people have suggested have been specifically mismanaged, we couldn't have the auditor look into those as examples?
Which, and you're referring specifically to IDEA?
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm suggesting making it more explicit that they look into the accounting and not just the allocations. If you really think the auditors think it's the same thing, and the rest of the committee agrees, I back off completely. But reading it to me, it
I
doesn't.
think that the auditor and the way they describe their statement of work is that they're going to do sort of spot checks in certain areas and specific
Right.
interviews. So if we want to suggest that the IDEA area is a great area for a spot check, I think that that's okay. I think that's somewhat included under question 1, but we could talk about the questions of IDEA specifically.
What does the rest of the committee have an opinion on this one?
Well, I was just going to comment to follow up on you. I saw Carolyn had her hand, but just a quick comment, Carolyn, if I can. So, Stephen, maybe one way would be if Dr. O'Connell is able to provide input to the auditor group about specific questions she had on the financial side, not on the work environment side, of course. And that would help guide them to issues that she identified. And then the auditors, then Mariah can actually determine the veracity of the situation. Like she could guide them to places where she thought there were.
I imagine that that's going to, I mean, they're going to interview people and
Yeah.
and they're going to look at friction points. And that's
Right.
that's what we're asking for. And I don't think it
I
needs
think
to
she'd
be,
be able to help them in that point.
I think everyone would.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay, yeah.
like,
Okay,
right? I don't think it's I don't think it's a secret. I'll say it's not a secret that IDEA is a question. So I think it's a very obvious area. I don't think it needs to be specified here, but if the committee wants it, let's add it, but you have to propose wording. And I'm not sure we need it.
Carolyn, we'll go to you.
Thanks. And I appreciate these questions and answers because this is sort of new territory for me. So I'm flying by the seat of my pants here. So I appreciate the education by osmosis. I have a few questions, but they may be answered by what you just described, Mariah, which is the ways in which this is meant to be management, not forensic, but I'll ask them. So in number 1, does the district fulfill its legal obligations in a timely way? That seems broad. Like, do we not need to define what timely would be? Is there a statutory definition of what timely would be?
Andy has his hand up, but I think this was Val's question, and I think
It
Val
is,
had
and
it.
I can help out.
Okay.
I mean, it depends, and I think that's part of why we wanted someone who has municipal experience and knows about special ed law
Yeah.
in particular,
Okay.
because sometimes it's the next day, sometimes it's for the fall. And that's why I think I also at some point added language about something about when appropriate. I'm sorry, I don't have it up in front of me at the moment, but the legal mandates, because sometimes it is the next day and sometimes it's something for the fall and
Okay.
sometimes it carries through the summer and things like that. So it's case specific, and there is language in there about, is there an expedited process, right, for when things do need to start the next day.
Okay, thank you. So the hope and assumption is that this will be done by somebody with the requisite experience or obviously the capacity to check the statute. Okay, thank you, Val. That answers my question. Number 2, for this is for number 5. Does the auditor believe that special education costs, and I understand, Mariah, you've described this question, and we've talked about this too, represents a broadly accurate picture? Would the same sort of maybe concern that that's sort of a broad question and vague, like, could it possibly make sense to say something like, what is the minimum level of spending that is required in order to fulfill its legal obligations? Or maybe, which is not meant to minimize the need for spending or suggest scaling back, but would sort of framing it that way be helpful?
I
Just throwing
don't
that out
don't think you can, sorry, I'm going to jump in again, because
That's fine.
I just don't think that you can ever know what that is, and that's
Okay,
the whole dynamic piece of OSS.
okay, Okay,
We have a student who is going
Yep.
out of districts tomorrow.
yep,
That's an amount of money that,
okay,
you
yep.
know, wouldn't be budgeted.
Understood. Thank
Yeah,
you, thank
yeah.
you, thank you. And then I guess it's sort of the same with number 4. Are there charges that would be better allocated? Is the question more like, were charges correctly allocated? But I don't know if that's then more forensic than what you're looking for.
I think you could possibly reword it, but I think also there could be cases, and I'm just giving one example where like possibly it could go to like it's sort of,
Okay,
yeah,
great.
so I don't want
Thank
us
you.
to be, yeah.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, did we have a second to your motion?
I'll second it.
Okay. Oh, Andy, you want to say something before we vote?
Yes, I just wanted to ask, is the plan that to fund this, we would be asking the advisory committee for a reserve fund transfer?
That is what I believe the plan is, because we do not have money for this and it is an unanticipated expense. So it meets the criteria.
All right, so the advisory committee will have a chance to weigh in directly then on this.
Well, hopefully this is their chance to weigh in directly on this. We cannot continue, we took the questions and we're taking that feedback. But I really hope that this allows us to move ahead with a statement of work as opposed to continue to iterate. Because the whole point was
agree, yeah.
expediency, yeah.
No, I'm on the same page there. I just want to make sure that all members understand that this now has to pass muster with the advisory committee.
Well, the request has to be voted favorably by advisory committee. I would say that there is a distinction there, but yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I do have one more question. In terms of how this is typically done and worded, you talked about that the assumption is people get interviewed. Would it make sense? Do we want that in writing? Like, does it need to say, Dr. O'Connell will be interviewed, et cetera, to list?
I personally don't think that I would micromanage the work of the auditor to that level. They know their business. So I'm not sure that we would write that, and I'm not sure. I don't know, for example, if the auditor can compel her to do that or how that works. So I think we need to let the staff and the auditor do their work, and that's my opinion. And again, this is the committee's statement of work, but
I guess the sort of reverse concern would be ensuring that people who may wish to be interviewed get interviewed and are able to be interviewed, and that's our direction.
I also don't know that we can, if 80 people want to get interviewed, I'm not sure we can say all 80 people are going to be interviewed.
I agree with
100.
Karen.
So
It's awfully
Stephen,
hard to do a statement of work which has a very open-ended mandate.
can it state that the deputy superintendent of the Office of Student Services will be interviewed?
Yes.
Well, that was my question earlier. Is she going to be one of the ones that gets an opportunity to help guide the process, or?
Well, gets an opportunity is different than will be.
Well, I didn't go as far as.
No, I know. I'm just saying it's not the same thing.
The auditor will make every effort.
Well, I guess honestly, my anticipation was the answer was going to be of course, but since now it's come out through. Okay, good. Okay, great, even better.
But do you want it written down? Do you all want
I would like to see it written down. I would like to offer a friendly.
No, I
amendment.
don't want to see it written down.
Okay.
I feel like we're really trying to micromanage.
I do too.
We're giving them our SOW,
Yes.
and they've already taken a first glance at it. And unless there's something we really missed that's big,
But how is it micromanaging as opposed to any of the other enumerated
They're
items?
supposed to do this without talking with her.
Exactly. Like that's like,
I
the
don't
basic,
know.
I mean,
So, I mean, it's sort of,
It's obvious, but without it being spelled out, in a statement of work.
Then we don't have to
we don't
accept the
know.
report.
Right. Well, we spent the money by then. Just
We
a-
don't pay it
Well,
till.
let's let Sarah speak. She hasn't spoken yet, so Sarah?
I think I'm going to be in the minority of voting no, so I don't want to belabor the point, but I just want to explain why I'm voting no. I think that the auditor came back to us with what is they're able to look at, taking into account what we wanted to see, and offered us what they were going to see as the scope of the work. So I would have rather to go with what that was, with a price that we already knew, and get going more quickly. So that's the only reason why I'm voting no.
You're voting no on the whole thing?
Yes, when we vote for the scope of work, I will be voting no.
I see.
But my understanding is if we vote yes, it will be pretty much what Mariah has suggested. So it's
These are
actually,
very minor clarifying questions that.
it's actually what we sent
Yeah,
to the,
basically, right, just what we sent.
okay, I'm going to call the vote.
Please, yeah,
And
thank you.
let's see what we've got. If you don't like
Wait,
it,
hold on. I'd like to offer
no.
a friendly amendment that would supersede that, which is that we added to this that the auditor will make every effort to interview the deputy superintendent of OSS. She's not been here for each of the last 2 meetings, and I think it's possible that she may also not wish to be there for this meeting, or for some reason that we don't understand, not participate in that as well. So I'd like to offer a friendly amendment that the auditor make every effort to interview the deputy superintendent of OSS.
Okay, do I have a second?
Seconded.
Okay, I guess we're going to vote on that friendly amendment. And then, depending on that vote, we will go to the original. Jesse,
Yes.
Sarah,
No.
Mariah,
No.
Helen,
No.
Carolyn,
Yes.
Stephen,
Yes.
Andy,
No.
Val,
Yes.
and I vote no as well. So what does that come out to?
That's a no.
5 noes. Okay, now we're going to go to the original, which was
Well, the revised,
revised.
yes, the
original.
revised one, yeah,
Okay.
with the 2 additional questions.
Jesse,
Yes.
Sarah,
No.
Mariah,
Yes.
Helen,
Yes.
Carolyn,
Yes.
Stephen,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Val,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. Thank you for all your work. That's a lot of work.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Are you leaving now?
I cannot leave now. We will, I think, hear from Susan and, yeah,
Okay, okay.
and then I will go.
I'm not trying to get rid of you. I'm trying to help you out here.
I know, I just feel like I need to be present for
Okay.
this part of it.
Well, I was going to say we could do, like, you could get back on at home.
I will be distracted. when I
Okay,
get home.
okay, fine. Great.
Not this.
To our speakers, but there'll be a few more minutes.
So there's a,
15 more minutes.
A few, I said a few.
Of you. Well, there's only 3 slides, so maybe you're right.
Well, really two, because one's just the title.
There you go.
Yeah. So I wanted to provide you with a few updates.
you got to be closer to the mic, that's all, just closer. Or hold it. Or hold
How's this?
Yes.
Is this, okay, I'll try to do this. Oh, is this all right? Am I good?
it close up, it's great.
Okay. All right. So we have some news from the folks upstairs. They've made some adjustments to their revenue forecast, and I wanted to share that with you. That frees up some additional revenue that is then allocated to us as well as the town. And so this is just the updated information. So I'm going to just take a minute and walk you through. This is really hot off the press. So the first column, of course, is what we received this year in FY25. So those numbers should look familiar. The school allocation of $136,847,618. That's what we got for this year. Their original forecast in for FY26 that they published on December 11th had a revenue forecast of $139,627 for us. The town made some adjustments. I'll speak to that in a moment, and has now shared with us that our new allocation is $141,019,793. So what that means is that available to us at this point in time in new revenue to help support next year's budget is the $4,172,175. So when they had published this back on the 11th of December, we were to receive the $2,779,000. And so that number has grown to the 4.172. So on the second section of the table, I thought it would be important to kind of call out what the differences were between the December and the January iteration. And so the adjustments that they made on the town side was to increase their estimate of revenue by adding some additional resources on the state aid line. So that was $319,778. And then the above the line expenses, so as I explained before, they have their gross revenue, and then there's some expenses that get netted out of that gross revenue, and then that net revenue is then divided between the town and the school. So that some of those above the line expenses were also altered. And so what the town has done is to reduce the allocation of CIP funding from 6.6% to a 6%, so that they reduce that by 0.6, which means the expense is less, which gives us more revenue below the line. And in addition to that, where they were forecasting health insurance, it's still at the 12%, but they reduced the participants by I think it was 10. And so the combination of those two freed up additional revenues for us, okay? So some was they lowered the above the line expense, and they raised some of the revenue forecasts, okay? Now, we'll get another iteration of this when they publish the cherry sheets, Gov1 will be translated into local aid distributions for each city and town and regional school district in the state. And we should have that in the next couple of days. And then Melissa Goff will run through this iteration again. We have a town school partnership meeting next week, and I think it's Wednesday. And so we'll get yet another version of this. But I thought it was very newsworthy because, that's a significant amount of additional revenue. Now, if you remember when I did the presentation with you last month, the town, when you had gone through the override process, you were expecting another like $6 million in revenue, right? And so there was a delta between what was being shared with us for our revenue now compared to what you had estimated a couple of years ago. And so this gets closer to what you were expecting. Not there yet, right? Not there yet, but certainly closer. So when I looked at the gap back then with you, maybe you'll remember this number, the $6 million number I said, and $3 million was attributed to revenue loss on the town. So we've made up, 1.4 million of that revenue side that was creating a problem for us. And hopefully that will improve again, either by having those above the line expenses be reduced or the revenue number being increased. So more to come. Last year we went through this process. We get these periodic updates. So stay tuned.
Susan, can I ask a question on the adjustment to state aid?
Sure.
Does that include the $75 per pupil in the governor's budget?
No, because that information wasn't available when Melissa gave this to me. I think she gave this to me on Friday. So yeah, that has not been taken into consideration. She did put some additional money in, but it wasn't $70. So I think we'll have some more favorable numbers after she gets, the cherry sheets.
It's 75, right? Up to 75 per pupil?
Yeah, that was my.
Yeah.
And she also made some adjustments to their forecast on the town. But we'll have that. We'll have that, and then that won't be a mystery and it won't be a guess. So as soon as the cherry sheets are published, and I'm assuming she's anticipating she'll get that. In fact, I had asked her if, maybe she could run the numbers before tonight's meeting, and she said, I don't have the cherry sheet. So stay tuned on that. In tandem to this, of course, we're going through the budget build process, and we're pretty knee-deep into that. And I'm going to share a little bit about where we're at with that. So when we develop the budget, it's a needs-based, budget. And so we've been going through the process of, collecting information from our budget managers. And they present their requests, and, we roll them up and we have conversation about, what does this mean, and, well, why are you making this request, and all of that. So those have been ongoing. I'm pretty close to having the staffing plan, which is, of course, the most significant portion of the budget comes in the way of staff. And then Diane oversees the non-salary expenses. And so she's actively building that side of the equation. So I don't have many details on the non-salary side, but I thought I would share, how some of these numbers land. There's always questions about what are the breathing costs of your contract, right? So when I go through this process, I try to capture, that data so that when we're asked, we can share that. So the cost of COLA, and the cost of COLA in the contracts is 2.75%, as you know from the information I shared around the principles. So a COLA of 2.75 will cost us about, $3,600,000. Step and column, so in all of the teacher contracts, Unit A and Unit B, there's steps and there's columns. So the columns sometimes they're called lanes, some, degree columns. So staff are actively engaged in getting graduate degrees, and so as they earn certain numbers, then they can move along the continuum of the columns on the scale. And then they also move another step, for each year that they are employed here. And so the impact of step and column is $2.2 million. So that's good information to have. Now, I can't tell you if that's what it typically is, because I'm just starting to track this information for you. I tracked some of it last year. I'm tracking it this year. The younger your staff is, the more your costs in step and column are, right? When you have an older staff, and you're looking at the bell curve of how the staff profile is, if you have an older population, then they're getting COLA. So that can vary depending on where you are in your, your staffing profile in terms of where they are in their career. So then there's the adjustments. It's like, what the heck is that? So I go through the process of taking anyone that I have retirement information on, and I, take and change the salaries around based on the information that I have there. Also, we looked at sectioning. We looked at what our enrollment numbers are in the forecast, and we updated that, and then we've made some adjustments there. So, we might be adding a kindergarten and lowering a first grade or whatever. So that process has taken place. But also, it's a time where, new staff requests are put forward. The only new staffing requests that have been moved forward because of this tough financial circumstances that we find ourselves in are those that are associated with kind of more mandated services. And so there's a request for 23 new staff members, 18 of them OSS associated and 5 ELE associated. And so that's predominantly caseload oriented. And or we have students that are in BEEP that are then moving out of BEEP and require, one-to-ones or whatnot. So the 23 staff members are associated with caseloads and direct student needs and services.
Is this in addition to the new staff that we have already looked at in the position control for the first half of the year?
Yes.
Okay, so it's 23 plus whatever that large number is that we have already.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So in the base of the budget, what has been approved in the current year gets into the base, and then I roll it from there. And so these are 23 additional staff members, okay? And then we have the grant shift piece that we've been grappling with, right? And that's a problem we see in this year's budget. And, and so we're going to try to fund that through one-time revenue sources and or reductions in other areas. Nonetheless, this is going to come online in mass next year, right? We have to come up with a recurring revenue source. And so I'm estimating that to be about $1.4 million in additional costs that hit our operating budget. Okay, so when I use one-time revenue, which it's not advised to do in a year to cover recurring expenses, it creates what we call a structural deficit. And next year, I don't have that one-time revenue. It's gone. I can use it for 1 year, and then we have to bring those expenses online. And so that's what we're seeing here on the grant shift. I haven't finished the grant shift work. I plan on doing that piece tomorrow. But that's my estimate of, based on my conversations so far with all of our budget managers, what I believe is going to shift off of grants that we anticipated for the current year and onto our operating expenses and need a funding source. So that's that. And so when I add up those 4 components on the salary side, it comes to about $9,900,000, so basically $10 million in costs. On the non-salary side, this is not a scientific number. I just put a plug number in here. Diane's been working actively on that, and she wasn't able to give me an all-in number on the increase, but I wanted to put something out there so that it doesn't, you don't think that 10 is, and this is the all-in ask, okay? So when we go through the budget process, this is normal, and now we have to iterate, right? We have to iterate and we have to bring this down. So the next question I figured would be important, that you'd want to know is, what do we got to bring it down by, right? And so if these numbers hold true, and we have this revenue number that I shared on the prior slide of $4,172,000, that means we're going to be reducing our budget as it exists right now by $8,227,000. So that's a lot. That's a lot, and we'll be coming to you with a list of what we're calling bad ideas, because we don't want to do any of this, right? But we'll give you a list of kind of the menu of things that we can do to reduce it down to that number. Hopefully, we'll get additional revenue again, which will help soften the blow a little bit more. But we have a lot of work to do to get our budget into alignment with what our allocation from the town is going to be. So that's where we're at.
So we have lots of hands up.
Yes.
Lots of hands up. Let's start with Andy, and then we'll just go around. Carolyn, Helen, and Sarah, did you have your hand up? Yeah. Andy, go ahead. Oh,
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Susan. I guess it's great news for now that we seem to have $1.5 million more than we thought we did 6 weeks ago. I also wanted to say I really appreciate the work that you did in breaking out the breathing costs that are due just to steps and lanes and nothing to do with COLA. That is something I've been wondering about and asking about for years. And I do wonder, what is it about our demographics that causes that growth, right? Because you can imagine theoretically a situation where everything cancels out and steps and lanes don't actually add anything to your budget year on year, because you have junior people coming in while senior people move out, and meanwhile everyone in the middle advances. Do you have any sense of sort of what's happening to cause that growth?
I actually, when I look at this number, Andy, I don't think that this is unusual in my experience. So in my experience, 3% increase in your salary costs due to step and column annually is not unusual. Sometimes that can spike up to 4% if you have a lot of young staff that join your ranks. So I don't think that's that number of 2.2, because if the COLA is, it's kind of low if you think about it as a percentage, because if the COLA is 2.75, right, and steps and columns are 2.2, that tells me that your staff is on the senior side of the equation. So you don't have a lot of people moving up and through at the same pace I've seen before. Now that can change tomorrow. You can have, your retirements and all of that. Now the other thing I'll say too is that in the adjustment line, that's where I capture what I call the breakage from a senior staff member leaving, and then putting in our placeholder, which is a master's 6, right? So if somebody's leaving at master's 45, and they're here for 16 years on the top of the scale, we're not budgeting at that level, right? We take that breakage, to your point, and it kind of, it mitigates the impact of the 23 new staff, right? that we're adding. So that gets netted on the adjustment line. And then, like I said, typically we wouldn't have the grant shift either. Like that's not something we'll see, we should not see. That's not something that you would typically be experiencing. So that's another kind of wild card that we have to grapple with. And, so did that answer your question, Andy?
I don't think I have my head around it, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can
Thank you.
look more once I have time and staff, of course. I'd
Yeah.
love to dig into this, and then I can look at your profile at a deeper level and then share with you my impressions there. But I just, time is the enemy always.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm looking at the time. We're running quite late. So we have lots of people who want to speak. I'm going to let you all have time. That's fine. But just be aware of the time because we still have a lot of business. So Carolyn and Helen.
Thanks, and
Sarah?
thanks, Susan, for this update.
Oh, I know Stephen's up there. I know.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Carolyn.
Just so I'm super clear, is this Unit A, Unit B? This is fifth floor?
Everything.
Everything. So the COLA assumes that non-aligned, you've plugged in some number for non-aligned that assumes a particular raise.
Yes.
And then if I'm doing the math right, 23 new staff, is that if they are largely OSS, is this a lot of one-to-one paras, different kinds of staff? Because I'm seeing that that's on average 117 and change per person, which seems high, but is that because are these numbers inclusive of benefits?
No, they're
Benefits,
not.
oh, benefits come out of the town on the revenue side?
Yeah.
Okay.
The adjustments are a variety of things. So like I said, it includes when I call it rolling the staffing plan, right? I do it incrementally so I can capture each piece of data. But when I get to the adjustments, I just make all the adjustments at the same time, including the ads. So it's not that the cost of the 23 new staff is $2,700,000. $2,700,000 is a combination of all of those changes. But I wanted you to also be aware that if we didn't add any of those staff, that number could be actually negative, because of things like retirement. But it isn't the case. We have students with needs, and some of those are coming up. For example, 7 paras have been added in order to meet the needs of students coming into the elementary school from BEEP, okay?
But why aren't they on our budget already in the BEEP?
Because in BEEP, they don't do typically one-to-ones.
Oh, I see.
Right.
Yeah,
So
because
when they
it's-
come out and they're going into a much more rigorous, independent environment, then they need one-to-ones, right? So there's 7 one-to-ones coming out of BEEP that they don't currently have them. And the staffing is rich enough in BEEP in order to be able to meet the needs of the kids and the programming there without having one-to-ones in general. So in BEEP, I think we only have one-to-one right now. But when they graduate out and they come into our K-12 then, or our K-8s, then there's a need for that additional support.
Does the 2.7 also include the 750 and the stipends that you had identified this year? Is that one of the other elements in there?
All of that has been added
Yes.
in, right?
Right, so that's also in that adjustments bit already?
Yeah, some of
Yeah.
that is, some of it was captured, yes. So it's everything. So anything that's changed just gets netted out. I just thought, usually people, I try to go by what are the typical questions that I'm asked, and so is there new staff in your proposal, and that's why I thought I'd call that out. The other things are just kind of the way you do business, and yes, of course, we had to add, and it includes, our proposal includes all of those forms of compensation that were missed. I think if there's nothing else, when you get this proposal, I think Jody, the directors, this has been very collaborative. It always is a very collaborative process internally with administration, with a lot of input, but we feel like when you get this budget, it has all of the costs associated with running your programs. And that is a big deal, because I don't
Okay, we're
think
going to go to Helen.
we've had that
Helen?
clearly. Yeah.
I think my question was answered, though. I think the adjustments, it's hard to see how they take into account the people who are retiring and the lower cost for the new people hired. That's the one piece that I was asking like Carolyn, but it's okay.
I mean,
now it does.
I can certainly give you what the cost of the 23 new are, and then you can see this is the total cost of that. And then de facto, all of the other things are netting out in different ways.
Yeah,
But
it's okay.
Yeah.
It's all right. I mean, this is all, this is going to change
it is.
as we
It
go
is.
through it, so.
Sarah?
I've been wondering if, as you get this information, are there, and you will provide us with the list of bad ideas later.
Yeah.
Are there things that we're already doing? Are you already, have you freezed any spending for operation? Have you requested that people hire with less experience? Is there anything that's been done already?
Well, I think making sure that everybody's on the same page for what is in, for one. And then two, things like that, what we're putting in as our placeholder is a Master 6. And that is what you're expected to ensure that, sometimes you'll hire a bachelor's and sometimes you'll hire above, but the idea is that as a budget manager, you're trying to have your average cost be a Master 6. So it doesn't limit people to not hiring somebody with a lot of experience, but it's being mindful that, we have X number of dollars here, and so we have to be thoughtful about that. Now, sometimes in certain positions when you're hiring, like, let's say you're looking at a physics teacher or some of these other really, I mean, you're going to pay what you're going to pay because there aren't many of them, and if you land a good one, you're going to pay for that. But other positions, you get many more applicants. So kindergarten or lower elementary school, you typically get a really rich pool of candidates. So it's like taking all of those things into consideration when you hire. But we do talk about that. In terms of this year, yes, we are right now actively asking people to submit POs for what they think is essential to complete the year. So we'll know in another week or so for the next Finance Committee meeting, what we think we're going to be able to, comb out of those non-salary accounts to be able to address some of our deficit challenges that we have. So we're doing a lot of different things for
We're
this
going to go to
year.
Stephen. Thank you, Susan. Stephen?
Thanks, Suzanne. Thanks, Susan, for this presentation and for breaking this down for us. So I just want to make sure I understand some basic things. Last school committee meeting, the projected deficit you had for us was around 6 million. Now it's 8.2. Is that correct?
It is. And so what's the
is.
difference?
And so, no. So the only changed data point was that the town's revenue, the projected revenue that goes to us is increased by 1.4 million. So the big change is that the projection model has changed in that your budget build now includes the slide that's currently in front of us, right?
Correct.
So are there future major changes to the projection model, or should we start considering this number? Because I'm finding it hard to understand how seriously to take this current figure given that the model is swinging around so wildly.
I don't know. I guess I wouldn't say it's swinging around wildly.
Well, if it was 6 million last time, and the only data point that changed was an increase of 1.4, but now we're seeing a decrease of 2.2 million from last week's projection, then the only difference that we're seeing at the school committee is a major change in the model that led to a negative change of 3.6 million, which we couldn't have anticipated, right? The last time we saw it, or should we have known?
No, so the two things that changed, the model hasn't changed, its circumstances have changed, right? And so the grant shift,
2 weeks ago?
when I presented this in December, when I presented this information to you about FY26 we're talking about, just to be clear, we're talking about FY26. The adjustments to add the new staff weren't something that I was aware of, right? So I couldn't report something that I wasn't aware of. On the grant shift, that became known to me in a real concrete way only in the last couple of weeks. So those two things are really major factors in why the expense side is going up at a pace that we didn't anticipate 2 weeks ago, right? And I'm actively working on this and a variety of other things to try to hone in on, what is our need and what is the implication of some of the challenges that we faced this year, and how does that play out for this year that we're in
I'm
now.
sorry, could you say that one more time? I'm listening and I'm not getting it. What changed on the expense side that you now know that you didn't know previously?
I didn't know that that we were going to have requests for 23 new staff.
And that just came in.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that.
Yeah, this week. This is like work I'm doing right now actively with our budget managers. The grant shift has been evolving in my understanding of what has to come off grants that we originally had planned on being on grants in comparison to what the grants were written for and approved, the amounts that were approved in them.
And we had projected 0 new staff.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of any staff. Some of these things evolve. So I have to say that, like, for example, the ELE, Jody's been taking a deep dive in that because we have had an enormous influx of students coming in that have ELE needs and that are above and beyond what we can actually deliver on right now. And so if you ask Jody, because we talked about this earlier today, how many do you really think you need in order to meet the demand right now? It's 10. And these are needs we have right now that we're not able to fill. So we're, Jody's trying to be reasonable and say, well, at least let's add 5 this year, and then maybe next year with the override we add 5, but we still have to meet the needs of the kids. And on the OSS side, I've met with all of the directors for OSS as we've built this up in the last several days, and this is what we've put together for what those needs are. And it's asking those important questions like how many kids are coming out of BEEP and what are the implications for that? What do their IEPs say, so that we can make sure we don't get into these recurring, what I call, part of our challenge here is a budgetary problem, right? In other words, if we need 20, let's budget 20. Let's not say 15, and then we wind up in this kind of squirreling process where, we don't have enough money and we have the needs. So this includes everything that they believe is essential in order to meet the needs of the kids in their current IEPs for the upcoming year. And it's a lot. Normally you don't see a 23% increase, but I think some of this is people are very sensitive to the circumstances we're faced with today and are looking really hard at what our caseloads are, what the needs are, and what is our staffing needs in comparison to what those service delivery aspects of ELE and OSS.
Thanks very much.
Okay, Val?
Thank you. I heard you say 7 paras for BEEP. I'm not clear what the 11 other positions in OSS are. I'm wondering if we'll get a breakdown. And
Yes,
I think I heard you say that there's also money in here that's not the 23 staff. Is that right?
Yeah, yes. So there's some of what's on the adjustment line. The adjustment line's a net number, I guess is what I've been trying to say.
Right.
It's not, yeah.
And so is that 100,000, a million? Like, can you give me a ballpark of what that non-staff number is?
I can't off the top of my head. I can look at it and I certainly.
Okay. I mean, I'm just wondering if it's half or if it's 10%. Do you have a ballpark, Susan?
I'm sorry, can you just
A
ask?
ballpark of whether it's, 50% or 10%?
Of
Is
what?
for
I missed.
other expenses versus.
He's asking of the 2.7 million of it, what fraction of the 2.7 million is referred to costs associated with the 23 new staff versus
The
other?
majority of that.
Okay.
Yeah, the majority of
Thank you.
that is, yeah. And so to answer your question, I said 7B because I just happened to meet, and we just did that more recently. But there's a couple of special education teachers at some schools, related services, so OTPT speech, BCBAs, increasing and/or adding full-time positions. Sometimes it's increasing somebody from a .8 up to a .2, and paras.
So I think
Yeah, but-
we're going to wrap this up for now because we've got public comment that's quite late. But in addition, there'll be a lot more conversation about this. So when is your next finance meeting?
Why, thank you for that transition. Our next finance meeting is February 5th, right? February
And just super quick, can the slide, Susan, go into the meeting materials online? Thank you.
Yeah, okay. All right. Susan, thank you very much.
Yep.
I appreciate it. I just want to say, I'm sorry for those that have been waiting so patiently, but we are going to move into public comment.
Step away, Suzanne.
Yeah, you're going to tuck away. That's fine. Thank you so much, Mariah, for all the work you're doing for us. And Nick Rothstein, you are up first. Thank you for waiting. You've been very patient.
I appreciate it. Thank you. You guys hear me okay? Yeah. All right. That's all right, Mariah. My name's Nick Rothstein. I am a long-term resident of Brookline, BHS graduate. Both my kids are going to graduate Brookline High, and I'm still a resident here, like I said, and I've been teaching at Brookline teaching English for 24 years at this point, okay? And while I'm a resident, while I'm a teacher, and while I am a parent of students here, I like to always say that I'm speaking for myself here, even though I know that some of the things I say tonight are mirrored by my colleagues. Again, I apologize. I know how tired you guys are. I'm tired too. I'm neck deep in mid-years, and things make matters worse. The Brookline police surrounded my house last night trying to chase down a car thief. Woke us up at 2 o'clock in the morning, so I've been up since then. I got a lot to say, but I'm not going to say that right now because, again, I'm too tired, and I know you guys are too, and I appreciate you. I'm here because I would like to express my dismay at the decision for the second time in 3 years of the English department to remove its proposal to offer advanced placement English in our curriculum. And again, I had a whole lot to say, but I'm going to shelve this, and I'll just, let me see, I'll be as brief as I can. I think AP English is important for a number of different reasons for the high school, all right? First one is I think it's equitable, all right? I think it adds to equity for a number of different reasons. We've been running after-school programs, after-school prep classes for 3 years now at the high school, and we've been specifically targeting lots of different students to try and come and join and be part and sign up to take the exam. And that's been pretty successful in my eyes from what I've seen and from what I know. But besides from all that, the opportunity to be able to open up AP English, at least to the junior class, all right? At the moment, right now, all we have is a push, AP US History as well as AP Chemistry. For those of you who have ever had kids who have gone through Brookline High, if those are the only two things offered junior year, I don't have to tell you, there's about 200, 250 kids who are taking those right now. And I love my history department, got plenty of friends in the science department as well. I don't have to tell you if you've had any kids who are in either of those classes. While on one hand, they're working hard and being tested, but they're also probably cursing the high gods, the fact that they're in it right now because it may not be their favorite subject. They might be in it just because they think they need to take it. AP English would open up at least another opportunity for other students to be able to take a course they might like. You got to imagine there's at least 50 kids in the junior class who English might be their favorite subject. Either way, AP English opens doors to a number of different kids. Second reason why is the community demands it. All right, and again, if what I witnessed a year ago for the community demanding at least another examination of unleveling the freshman classes, 3 years ago, at least 100 kids took the AP English exams. Last year, around 85 took it. This year, we have 130 students sign up for the AP English exams between the literature and language exams. If that's, we've had 2 petitions go around this year trying to get people to, again, encourage people to, again, I'll be honest, I don't know what happened to those petitions, but I know at least 2 of them went around, one from a body of parents, one from a body of students, who are asking to see if we can get AP English into our curriculum. So the bottom line is this, there's several hundred students who want this to happen. Third thing is this, you can take AP Physics, APUSH, AP Chemistry, you can take AP Music Theory, you can take AP Art Design, you can take AP Computer Science. Every single discipline in the high school has an AP section, with the exception of AP English. And it's just absurd to me that we don't have it at this point. It makes no sense to me in a lot of different arenas. When we offered it and brought this proposal up over 2 years ago as well as this year, there was a handful of teachers who wanted to teach it, a number of teachers who were on the fence, and then there's been a very strong vocal opposition against it. Some from my department, some from other programs in the building, some administrators. And I'll say this, if you speak to any of the people who are opposing this, they will come at you with a lot of maxims, a lot of platitudes about the history of the AP system, about the culture that it might create, which I think is arguable and provable and founded in a lot of different ways, all right? And so I don't really have a problem with that argument, with anyone being philosophically opposed to the AP system. What I do have a problem with is anybody who's cloaking any other ideas that they have or any other ulterior motives that they might have behind those particular maxims and behind those particular ideas. Right now, I feel like this has become an ethical issue for me. It's become a moral issue for me. And I'll finish with this. Here's what this community can't do. We can't, on one hand, say that AP systems are wrong or the AP system is wrong for a portion of our community, and therefore it's wrong for everyone. And at the same time, these same people who are extolling that are using the AP system for themselves. You can't, in this system, say, we don't want to use this. We can't say in our community that we don't want to use this system because it has been traditionally segregating, traditionally elitist, except it's okay for my kids to use it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Next up is Linda Roseman.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Linda Roseman. I'm the community liaison to the Hayes School Council. I'm a retired Driscoll pre-K para and Hayes School substitute teacher, and I'm former chair of the Police Commissioners Advisory Committee. Almost 4 years ago, our well-respected school resource officer program fell victim to the nationwide anti-police sentiment generated by the murder of George Floyd. I believe that those who advocated for abolishing the SRO program did not fully understand what they were eliminating. Our program was a model for other municipalities, and ironically, we are now the only school system in this area without a school resource officer program. At the August meeting of the Policy Subcommittee, you invited principals to come and discuss their top priorities for the school year. Reinstating SROs was in the top 3. Building leaders spoke eloquently about the void created by the absence of the school resource officer program. And on November 12th, the Select Board voted to ask you to revisit this and consider returning the SRO program to our schools. SROs were not security guards, surveillance teams, or disciplinarians. They forged relationships with students and often connected students and their families to services and resources in our community. They helped steer misguided students away from the criminal justice system by negotiating diversionary contracts so that first offenders could avoid a criminal record. SROs augmented the health and wellness curriculum by teaching about internet safety, relationship safety, drug and alcohol use and abuse, and how certain behaviors can result in criminal charges. Some have argued that police officers should not be in classrooms teaching our students. The SROs came in as experts, just as many parents and other community members are invited to come and speak to students about their area of expertise. I was inspired to come forward to speak in support of the SRO program after hearing a mom speak about her daughter who sought help at the Brookline police station one night when she was feeling distraught and suicidal. Her daughter viewed the public safety building as a safe haven because she had a positive relationship with the SRO at BHS. You have heard your building leaders say that they value this program. When SROs were initially cut, several building leaders and school counselors urged you not to eliminate that program, and they were ignored. Community policing is about relationships. Public safety officers are part of our community. The SROs acted as another trusted adult students could go to for support, as well as a resource for staff and principals. Forming and maintaining relationships between our young people and our police officers is good policy. And given your budget deficit, I should point out that this program will not cost you a dime. SROs are funded by the police department. I urge you to put this on the agenda for discussion and a vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up is Dan Saltzman.
Hey, good evening. Thanks for letting me speak. I appreciate it. My name's Dan Saltzman. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 6. I'm a Pierce parent and a BHS parent. I have 2 kids in PSB now and one who graduated from Brookline High School last year. I'm a former school administrator. I currently own and operate a small firm consulting with schools of all different sizes on issues of technology, including school life safety systems. I've been in and out of dozens of schools over the past 20 years. I'm also a practicing attorney with significant criminal defense experience and child advocacy work. Ultimately, I've both interacted with the police more than most people, and I've been in and out of schools more than most people. I'll start the substance of my comments, and I'll end on the same note by saying that regardless of your feelings about police and in general SROs in schools, it's a safety benefit for our kids. SROs are a safety benefit for our kids at a time when safety is paramount. When all is said and done, schools are safer with SROs. SROs know the kids. They know the facilities in ways in which the rest of us don't pay attention. They know the staff. They know the town. They are undeniably an asset to school safety. But there's other practical reasons to have SROs. I'm regularly in various leadership and executive team meetings at schools, in district central offices. I couldn't possibly count the number of times that principals and superintendents reference the need to consult their SROs. Maybe there's a big basketball game happening and they're expecting a large crowd, or maybe there's an ongoing issue with a child and a non-custodial parent coming into the building. The refrain I hear in these leadership check-ins is, so I talked to our SRO and she's going to do this, or our SRO, I asked them about something else and here's what he thinks, or simply I alerted the SRO to this situation and he's now aware of it. I've heard that some people believe that the counselors can fill the role of SROs. But counselors are not trained to manage large crowds at a basketball game. They're not trained in law enforcement. And while they are indeed trained in working in areas of controversy and stress, it comes from a very different perspective. A counselor's role is not to manage and maintain public safety. An SRO is trained to do just that and to do that in our schools. I can tell you with 100% certainty that not a single school in which I've ever worked over the past 20 years would ever consider removing their SROs. They would never consider doing something that could denigrate the safety of the children. It's a safety issue. Since we've removed our SROs from Brookline, we've experienced some awful situations. And I think that those situations could have benefited from SROs being on site. In fact, I just heard a few hours ago, literally just read this like 4 hours ago, that a Brookline resident, former youth swim coach, I guess, and lifeguard here in Brookline was arrested for using Snapchat to lure several young children into sending explicit and degrading photographs and videos. Our SROs used to teach classes on internet safety. I don't believe that role has been filled since we removed them. It's my understanding that our principals want SROs back. They know. We know SROs are a security benefit to our schools. We should invite them back to our schools to help our principals, to help our community, and to help protect the safety of our students. I hope you'll do the responsible thing and make that happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, and we have one more speaker. Debbie, Debbie, you're going to have to help me with your last name. I'm really trying.
Hi, it's Debbie Hatziel Leftheriadis, but I'm also known as Debbie Hatz, Officer Hatz. I'm a Precinct 15, and thank you for your time. Precinct 15 town meeting member. I grew up in Brookline. I went to Pierce. I graduated from Brookline High. I raised 5 children here in Brookline. I'm still here. And I'm a retired Brookline police officer. I taught the DARE program, and then I was stationed at Brookline High School. So I was basically the SRO officer before they named it the SRO officer. And I just wanted to tell you a little about what I did and my experience, and because I was there. It was me. I was it. Everything that everybody has said before me is absolutely true. I was really sad when I heard, I wrote this, I was really sad when I heard for the Brookline kids, when I first heard that they were, what they'd be missing out on. I just wanted to tell you my experiences at Brookline High School. I began and ended my school day in front of the high school, in front of my police cruiser, where the kids were comfortable to stop by and ask questions, joke around, or just say hello. I had lunch at the restaurant, attended sporting events, school events, plays. The kids would invite me to things and I would go. They were comfortable with me. The kids trusted me. I was able to refer kids to the diversionary program instead of the court systems. We worked together. I was able to talk to kids about the pressures of being a teen, their choices about drugs, alcohol, all in an open, honest setting. I was in no way there to spy on them or punish the kids. I was there to help, to be available to their needs. Teachers had my phone number and they would call me regularly. The nurse had my number, the social workers, anybody at the high school, they all had my phone number and I had no problem answering it. And just like the previous speaker said, I would, in the second, I would go to a classroom, or we taught, a kid that was having a problem or having a hard day, they'd call me and I would talk to them. It was, these are things that aren't measured. And the trust that was built there. I see adult children that I had now that were my students, and they run up to me and hug me. And they remember me. They remember the police officers that were good to them. Now some children, they have experiences with police officers and it's a negative. It could be a negative situation. If you don't have somebody there that's guiding them, talking to them, that they can trust, that's what they're going to think about police. And that's not true, especially here in Brookline. Let's see, I had the special ed class teacher would call. I'd go in there and see them. At the time they had early education, I would go there, the nurse. And I helped in so many different situations. I wrote here that I hope this sheds some light on the value of this program and you'll consider putting it back into the schools. It's really difficult to be a kid, and they have so many distractions, so many new laws, so many, the phones, the social media, and we have the tools to teach children about all that. And now there are laws that the kids don't know about when they're texting and sexting and that kind of stuff, and they don't realize that they can get a criminal record because of that. And we want to prevent that. We want to be there. We want to help the kids there. And so, I think that the kids deserve all the support that they can get in this time. Again, it's really difficult to be a kid. I have two grandchildren at the high school, and I hear a lot of stories, and I think that it would be such a benefit to have us back. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your years of service. That concludes our public comment, and we are going to move on. We're making progress here. We're now going to look at the Brookline High School course catalog changes for next year. I have some notes that Betsy gave me, so hold on, Jody, we'll see what we've got here, because Betsy's really good about this. So there are, you have the course descriptions. There's 4 courses, 1, 2, 3, 4. So construction, a tour through the trades, contemporary United States history, social studies, Friendship in Literature and Film as English, and Justice in Action, Unpacking Crime, Law, and Consequence. All 4 courses were presented to the Curriculum Subcommittee on January 14th. We discussed them in great detail. We had the directors of the coordinators of the departments come and speak to us about their courses. The Curriculum Subcommittee voted unanimously to recommend that the school committee approve all 4 new courses. All courses are budget neutral, so they will only run if there is a student interest in registration. And we do have Jody here to answer any specific questions. We might have a few of our department curriculum coordinators here. There they are. There they are. Welcome. Sorry it's so late for you. I move that we do in fact approve the 4 courses, but I think we have to do each course, you said, right, Jody?
And I want to let you know that the Friendship and Film course has been removed from the courses. It didn't receive innovation funding. When we didn't know that when we presented to the subcommittee.
Friendship in Literature and Film.
Back page.
I think even if it receives that funding, we still need to approve it.
It didn't receive that funding, so we pulled it.
Oh, it did not, sorry.
It won't be in the
I
course
didn't hear you.
catalog next
I'm
year.
sorry.
Yep, they're withdrawing it. Okay, so we're down to 3. Okay. Should we just go one by one and vote for them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so the first one is construction, a tour through the trades. It looks really exciting. If you want to learn how to do a hammer and nail.
I'll move it.
Okay. Any questions or comments?
I think it's great.
Awesome. So cool.
So cool, yep.
Great.
Okay, we'll take a vote then. Jesse?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Mariah, are you there?
I am here.
How do you vote?
Yes.
Okay. Helen?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Val?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Okay, next one, contemporary United States history, social studies.
I'll move it.
Okay, I'll second it. Any comments or questions? I've never seen Jen so quiet and calm, but that's great.
But there's that great smile she has.
I know, why she's got so much energy. Jesse, how do you vote?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
Helen?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes, and I'll move it and second it too.
We did that already.
Oh, are you sure?
Yeah, that's why you're voting.
Okay.
Andy?
Yes.
Val?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. And last one. Well, this is a cool one too. Justice in Action, Unpacking Crime, Law, and Consequence. I'll move it.
Seconded.
Second it. Comments or questions? Jesse, how do you vote?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
Helen?
Yes.
Carolyn?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Val?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well.
Can I just take a moment to thank the 3 coordinators
Hi.
for hanging with us through that meeting? Thank you all. You're wonderful as always. Thank you too, Gabe.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being here so late. Okay, we're moving on. Oh, so Stephen, is this you? The personal electronic device policy.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, go for it.
All right. Can I share my screen?
Yes.
You should be able to, Stephen. Let me know if you have an issue.
All right. Let me know if you could see it.
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Now we can.
Was that a yes, Suzanne?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So you are looking at the draft PSB personal electronic device policy. I think you also, do you have a copy of it as well?
Yes. We do. We do.
This was fairly easy to put together because the principals did all the work. The K-8 principals put together policies for their schools. In their August meeting, they identified this as one of the areas that we could assist them by coordinating this policy. The process of putting this together was to identify areas where there was clear consensus and overlap, which was fairly straightforward. We also looked to MASC for sample policy, and so the process was really taking a MASC template for a PD policy and plugging in the areas of consensus directly into it. There are two sections of this policy, three sections. One, a very brief preamble. Two, a section for the K-8 schools. And then three, a section for BHS. I want to make, I think, just three comments here. One, the K-8 section follows an off and away policy, which is exactly what it sounds like. It followed directly from what the principals had already developed. The school committee slightly broadened the exceptions to make more explicit exceptions for students whose IEP or 504 might require an exception. But otherwise, it's pretty much taken directly from what were in the policies to begin with. It's also left broad in terms of how exactly they may implement as per the principal's suggestion. Point two is that BHS had its own separate handbook language, which I reorganized to match the organization of the K-8 version. So it has a little preamble and then its approach and then consequences. The version you're looking at here has two changes from the version that is in front of you. One is thanks to Dr. Fortuna. Thank you, Dr. Fortuna. She sent me some scholarly literature on PED policies, and I found very helpful a division of PED policies into three types, which helped me come up with like a philosophical category for the BHS policy, which is that it's a limited use approach. So I added a one-sentence preamble to the grade 9 through 12, just to say that it's actually not an off and away approach. It's a limited use approach, specifically, which means it's often out of sight except during instructional periods, except during designated times, which Dr. Fortuna's literature specified as lunch and passing periods, but I just said otherwise. And then the other part is after consultation with the deans at BHS, they suggested restoring language that the school committee had cut, which is that teachers in the handbook were asked to state clear classroom expectations about PEDs and the consequences for use in the class. So I've restored that to this paragraph here. Otherwise, it's as is. The third point I want to make is that unlike most school committee policies, this policy recommends consequences. The reason we don't typically recommend consequences is because that's typically within the school's jurisdiction to recommend. The only reason and rationale for the school committee for doing so is that it seemed to be the consensus preference of principals to have a standard set of consequences for across schools. So this was taken from directly from policies that were in the K-8 schools. However, I spoke with a principal last week who suggested that perhaps we reconsider having consequences. This was in the K-8 schools, saying that this might not be a good precedent for the school committee, and perhaps this might not age well. And also in my conversation with BHS deans, they suggested that we not include the consequences section here. So I want to leave open that part for discussion among the school committee. So those are the 3 points I want to make for discussion.
Thank you, Stephen. And just to be clear, this is a first reading, so you want a conversation, discussion about the policy, and then
I'd like, yeah, just your overall comments about the policy. It's quite brief. I'm interested in your overall reactions, but I'm specifically also interested in whether you think it's appropriate to include consequences in this policy.
Okay. Carolyn?
Thanks, Stephen. I agree with your direction that you just mentioned of not having consequences in the high school. That doesn't seem appropriate. I'm interested in hearing, did you say you spoke to a principal who suggested taking out consequences for K-8?
I spoke to a number of principals sent feedback, and one principal suggested removing consequences among the K-8 principals.
And sorry, I'm not meaning to put you on the spot. Was that feedback shared with the policy subcommittee and I
I
missed it?
received it after the last policy subcommittee meeting.
Okay, so I'll have to, directionally, I am comfortable with consequences in K-8. And my sense, if I remember correctly, from the initial meeting with building leaders was that that was something that the sense was that would be helpful if that was at the district level. I might be getting that wrong. And I also, this is small, but in the last paragraph of the high school, students may use PEDs in public spaces during passing time or free blocks. Phone calls must be taken or made in private spaces, such as dean suites, empty classrooms, or outside of the building. I'm not sure I understand sort of the origin of that or the practicality.
That was language taken from the BHS handbook, and that was to ensure that the use of PEDs, the phone function on PEDs, was minimally disruptive. If you think the language could be changed to emphasize that, we could do that. That was how I understood it.
That makes sense. Having two children at the high school, that just doesn't, the specifics don't seem realistic, in addition to the fact that they almost never use the phone function.
Right.
But I think, to me, it doesn't seem unreasonable for a kid to be able to make a quick phone call in a hallway. So, but that's minor.
Okay.
Okay, Val?
Thanks. So Stephen, I don't know if you've seen the Study Act, which was filed, I think, Friday. It has support of both DESE and the MTA. And it's essentially a all-day ban on any kind of personal electronic device, with exceptions for things like IEPs or 504s or emergent in a case of an emergency. It does have a section, I think, I don't think it calls it consequences, but ways that you enforce it, I think was what I read. There's also a requirement that districts have some sort of like proactive social media, like impacts of social media on young people. That's part of the policy, and I'm not remembering all of it, but I just sent you the link, and so I think we should maybe look at it before we come back to this, so that we're not spending a lot of time line editing something that might have different requirements on the state level.
Thank you. I'll review that.
Thanks.
Okay.
I would just like to say about the consequences, so I see both sides. If you have uniform consequences, then whoever is enforcing that has something to go back to, and it's not arbitrary. But the other side of that is that one size does not fit all, and there's very well could be circumstances that we can't anticipate where these consequences may not be appropriate for a particular situation. So I actually am torn about that, and you can make them suggested. Not sure how to address that, but I could see both sides to this in terms of consequences, and I'm not sure how I would land. I probably would feel better not having specific consequences. There could be suggestions maybe for the deans or whoever's enforcing this, vice principals, principals, but those are my thoughts right now. Yeah,
Okay.
Jesse?
Yeah, I was going to add that I know in the policy that I provided Stephen from Philadelphia for their school district, which is fairly large, there are no consequences listed, but the question I had as we went through it was, how do you guarantee some fair and balanced approach to handling situations in which you find them? And one of the things that happened when we asked the building leaders for their policies at the end of last summer was that they all had consequences in them, pretty much every school. And I'm sure that the building leaders discussed some of this anyway, like amongst themselves, so no surprise that they had that. But it does tend to send a stronger message, I think, to parents that we have our arms around what to do when the rules are broken. And without it, how can we really stand up and say to the community, we take it seriously?
You know, I agree with all that, but like SWS is a particular program, parents don't know what the what the students have done or not done. It's part of their program that they have their own kind of tribunal or their own.
Well,
Whatever it is.
I think the choices between having consequences in the policy for standardization versus having consequences in the school handbook.
And it's possible to eliminate the consequences section for the 9 through 12.
Yes.
Yeah, and we could also say something like, Jesse, if we want to, that each school will articulate consequences for violations of this policy in its handbook or something like that. Again, though, I guess my only opinion is we should only provide this section if it's useful to and requested by principals. Otherwise, it feels like an overreach from the school committee.
Sarah?
So then I would like to go back to the 3 points that Carolyn made and reiterate those. Keep the consequences for middle school, eliminate the consequences for high school because they just don't feel age appropriate and they don't feel like the type of relationship that the high school teachers have with students. And then I would actually be a little bit stronger in what Carolyn said, that last line before consequences and then high school policy. Phone calls must be taken. I would eliminate that last sentence and just keep it with as long as they're used silently.
Phone calls must be taken as long as they are used silently.
No, I would eliminate the whole sentence that starts with phone calls must be taken.
Yeah, just take
I think
that
that
one
you
out.
have that idea with so long as they are used silently.
I
think
see.
you're all
I
set
see. I see.
there. I'm just saying a little bit stronger than Carolyn said, but she had made that point prior. And just overall, just, thank you for this policy that just helps student mental health so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay, seeing no other hands. Thank you, Stephen. I guess you'll take some of this and come back to us. Or you'll
Thanks.
take it
Am I
back to
still
Paul.
sharing? I can't tell if I'm still sharing. Oh, yes, I am.
Yes.
I stopped. Thanks, everyone.
Does this go back to policy or does it just come back to us?
I think it just comes back to you. So I'll integrate the edits. I think I'm gonna run it by the principals one more time on the topic of K-8 consequences, then I'll bring it back to the full school committee.
Maybe check with Val how long this bill might take to get through. Because if it's another year, we can have the policy and then adjust it. Or if not, it may be somewhat moot. I don't know how if the state can decide for us what we want as our policy.
I think it's going to take more than a couple of months. It will probably take a few months for it to get a hearing.
So it's still in the education committee.
I don't even know if it's been referred, Helen. Bill filing deadline was last Friday.
I got it. Okay, yeah. I think we can have a policy first.
Well, thank you, Stephen, and thank you to the policy subcommittee for the work. Okay, we're moving into subcommittee and liaison reports. If you don't have anything to report, that's okay, but if you do, that's fine too. Helen?
Hi, I'm sorry, but I have a lot. We've been busy in Capitol, yeah. We had a Capitol Subcommittee meeting on, today is Thursday, yesterday, and discussed the repair and maintenance budget, the request for next year. There was some pushback by me, by the chair, on the increase on the repair and maintenance budget and keeping the 167,000 possibly in a separate line item in our budget, that if we were to go over in the repair and maintenance, then we would have that funding, but otherwise would be in the school budget. And help me, committee members, what else?
SBC?
Yeah, that I'm going to talk about, but the capital. It was mostly the repair and maintenance budget that we discussed. I'm sorry? Oh, yes, and there was some good news about Driscoll and their energy costs comparatively to last year. And there were like, in 1 month, $30,000 of savings with the new system of the geothermal wells heating up the building. There was no need to go, even in the coldest days just now, there was no need to go back to the electric boilers that we have there as just in casers, if the others don't heat the building enough. And everybody was very comfortable in the building. So that's really critical. It's a good sign for that school. It'll be a good sign for the Pierce School. So those are the pieces that we discussed at the Capital Subcommittee. I'm sorry? Oh, and, oh, gosh, yes. One thing, and actually, Stephen, I was going to call you, and I'm sorry I didn't. One of the issues that came up, Mr. Mason gave a presentation on outdoor cameras at BHS that were included in the original BHS project, but weren't ever put in. And the question of whether we would recommend to the school building committee of the high school to allow monies from that project to go towards putting in those cameras. One of the questions that came up, and I think you may be dealing with it on Monday, is in your safety
Yeah,
issue.
I'll talk about this at the policy update.
Okay. All right, but so what I'm hoping is that, we can at least get, if we need to, and I'm not sure we need to, but if we need to, because we do have cameras in the elementary schools and the front doors, and we have at the high school at the front door. But anyway, so that was one of the issues that came up, and I think the cost was something like 150,000 approximately.
I think he said low sixes, low six figures.
Low six figures.
600,000.
So thinking
Okay.
it close to 100,
Around 100,000. Whatever it is, we will check on, and we'll manage that part, but I think the first part maybe, he was going to get the policy from Newton that has a policy on that and forward it to Betsy, who would forward it to the rest of the committee, and I'll forward it to you. Okay? And then the other good news is the Pierce School project, which has come in under budget significantly. The original budget was, I think, 168,000 for the current construction for the GMP. It came in at 164,362. Millions. Did I say thousands?
Yes.
I meant millions. I'm really sorry. What's a few zeros among friends, right? But the important part is it came in under. There has been some added scope from the town in terms of possibly sprinklering the library garage and the town garage, which were not part of the original project, and that's being carried now in the budget for 1.5 million. That's above the 164 that it came in on. There's also monies for mitigation for the park that we had to do in order to get the Article 97 approval. That's about I don't remember the exact number on that. There's an allowance carried, there's right now one of the bids is being contested by the electrical company. Town council is working on that, and we've asked the AG's office to opine on it. If the bidder, who is the second lowest bidder, prevails, it would be about 1.5 million more. So they've added that into a final figure of 167 million. So it leaves us about 100,000 under budget. There's one other thing, and right now I'm not remembering, that was also added into the scope. Oh, and that includes, the 167 million includes both add alternates that were included in the project, one for the windows of the historic building. They're about 10 years old, and it was determined as they were looking at them that they're not in great shape. And if we're redoing the building and renovating the whole inside, it makes sense now, since the roof has been done on that historic building, the pointing has been done, everything has been done, we should do the windows too. So that's add alternate one.
And sorry, how much is that? Sorry, I asked how much is that?
I know.
I just wanted to do it in the mic.
Yeah, I understand. And right now I want to, shoot, I have it here, but I don't know. Oh, alternates. So it must be about 1 million, because a little under 1 million, because the photovoltaics, which were the second add alternate, were 2 million. And
These are the windows on the historic building only?
hold on, something's not making
Yeah,
sense
it
here. I'm
seems like a
sorry.
lot.
Helen, are you absolutely talking into the microphone? Sorry, I'm not even.
Oh, I don't know if people,
Yeah.
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. The two add alternates together were 2.294 million, okay? Or 2.34. That's included in the 167 million, so we could get both add alternates. It was recommended at the meeting, and we will be voting on all of this once the building commission votes on it, the select board, and then we have to vote it. And that will be at our meeting on the 6th of February.
That's our next meeting.
Yes, correct, because we have to accept the bids by the 10th. Otherwise, they won't hold their numbers. The add alternate for the photovoltaics, the building commissioner, Janet Fearman, requested that we hold on that one right now, from the school building committee recommending it to be taken, primarily because we want to discuss it with the sustainability director, Alexandra Vecchio. She's been doing a lot of research on the difference in cost and maintenance, et cetera, for both owning or leasing our roofs. And we felt that it was really important to get her input in this. The other piece in this is that it may be less expensive to do it after the fact and to put it out to bid to solar companies.
Right.
So we're looking at all those factors right now, and so that's being held back. The other piece that's also included in the 167 million is the higher amount that the electrical company, I think they came in at $1 million more, something like that. That higher amount is being, so the total of 167 million is basically all in, with some pieces possibly going out. Yes?
Yeah, you said that the windows are about 10 years old.
Yeah.
And they are recommending swapping them all out?
Yes.
What's the problem? I mean,
Some of them are leaking. Some of them are going to be changed because of the configuration. It just seemed to make more sense to do the whole thing and have it all be airtight and done well.
Okay, thank you.
Now, by the time we get into the school, they'll be 13, 14 years old. So, yes,
Carolyn?
Carolyn.
Thanks. Can you just explain what the park extra cost is? I think you mentioned, yeah, and how much is that and what is that?
I didn't get the number, but it is, so there's certain things that were included in the base, you know, replacing the ball field that's there where the geothermal is going, replacing the basketball court, putting in a new entranceway into the park. Those were all things that were in there, in addition to trees, more trees and fencing. Well, the fencing is some extra that's being put in. The reason that we are doing that is in order to meet the conditions of the EINR, I think it is. Am I right? The DEP had conditions for us. They wanted us to do a certain percentage of work of what the value of the underground space was. We figured out and worked with them on what that percentage cost should be. Seems to me it was around 200,000, something like that. And so we worked together with the Parks and Rec Department to see what they really needed in the park that needed to be improved, and came up with the slide area that has a great deal of erosion on the two sides of the slide, if you're familiar with Pierce Park. And yeah, it's down a hill. And so the idea is to redo that space so that the erosion won't happen. There'll be some climbing areas for kids to be able to get up, and some steps up too. So that's going to be fixed, and some area where there's mulch right now will have that harder bouncy surface that we put in, and some more trees for the park.
It's park fixing, but not really related to the project because it's on the other side of the park from where everything's happening. Closer
No,
to
it's
Harvard Hill.
actually so the ball field is where the,
Right.
and this is on the
The
hillside.
slide is on, yeah, it's opposite,
Yeah,
that's what I meant.
correct.
Yep, thank you.
So
Correct.
this is because the geothermal wells are going underground, that we have to like repay ourselves back for using, there's a value to that land. And under Article 97, we're taking that value.
Correct.
Okay. And so we have to come up with stuff to do that's a percentage of that value of the
Right.
underground.
And we worked in coordination with Parks and Rec. Originally, there was nothing we were going to do at the park because the park had just been redone.
Yeah.
5 or 10, and it wasn't 10 years, I think it was like 5 years ago
Yeah.
or so. So, but this was one area, you know, even when you do a park, sometimes you make a mistake on how it's being done. And so this worked out well for both sides.
Okay, how you doing?
I think I am done. It's good news, and I just wanted to share it with
Thank
everybody.
you for all the work you do, Helen, on
Yes,
this, for
you're
sure.
welcome.
Curriculum, I actually haven't reported in 2 meetings, so just 2 meetings ago, just to let you know. They're recorded, right, Betsy? If people want to see it. It was a great conversation about science and K-8, and that was a lot of fun. And then we had 3 principals in to talk to us about the success of the middle grades program, and that also was enlightening. So if you have a chance and it's of interest to you, you might want to take a look at that. And then our last meeting, we actually went over the courses that we just approved, and that actually took the whole meeting. We went in depth with that. And what's coming up, Dr. Fortuna can help me with this, is we actually are going to talk about an agreement with Middlebury, what's the? Mass Bay. It wasn't Middlebury, I knew it wasn't Middlebury. Mass Bay Community College, and doing some, offering some coursework through there. And then talk a little bit about high school graduation, now that MCAS is no longer required, although I do believe the state's coming out with things as well, but I'm not sure when. So anyway, that's on the agenda for the next time. So join us if you can. Sarah.
Diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. We talked with the Office of Educational Equity, And we sort of heard kind of like the updated way that we think of equity, and they also incorporated the way that DESE asks us to do things, so.
And Mariah, do you have other additional thoughts from finance?
We've covered most of our last meeting, and I mentioned earlier that we have our upcoming meeting on February 5th. And of course, we're getting into sort of the peak of the budget period coming up. So lots of updates to come from finance, but not tonight anymore.
Thank you. Andy, on government relations?
Nothing new to report. Just a reminder that we have our annual meeting with legislators on February 10th, Monday.
Right, I don't know, Andy, I'm also thinking, I don't know if they will, we may want to have some conversations. Most of our priorities are around funding and budgeting and the money we get, but I'm also wondering if we might want to add something about some of the executive orders that are coming from the federal government and how that might impact the state, or what the state anticipates they might do to, I don't know, respond to those orders.
You mean at the February 10th meeting, or
The February
from
meeting.
us to them to give us some?
Well, it goes back, it's a conversation.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm thinking we might want to say some of these things are really important to us, and do they have thoughts about what might be happening
It's a great idea.
at this state legislation? That's new since when we set up our government relations priorities earlier. Yeah, just a thought. Policy, Stephen?
Nothing new to report since I last reported out, but I just want to note that the next meeting is on Monday, and instead of having two separate sessions, we're just going to combine both blocks into one mega block on what OSS and OEE has been working on, what they're calling the Student Civil Rights Policy, which is a proposed revision to J6 and J7 in the policy manual. I also just want to note that if three of the public commenters are still listening, that in the last block, we're going to take up the building and school safety to set parameters for for a discussion the following week on what should be included in reviewing sections E2 and E3 of the policy manual, which is student safety and well-being and school safety and security, which should include both, Helen, should both include surveillance and cameras, as well as SROs. So that last block won't undertake any draft reviews or substantial policy review, but just setting the parameters for that discussion. And we're also going to have an overview of a generative AI working group at the suggestion of the administration. So that's coming up on Monday. It's a really packed docket.
What time are you starting, Stephen?
Still 5 to 6:40.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay. Additional liaisons and updates for anybody?
I have one.
Yeah, Jesse?
So last Thursday evening, at the urging of the leadership of CPAC, for which I'm one of the liaisons with Stephen, they convened a community meeting to discuss the issues that are currently in front of us in the community. Last count, there were probably about 40 parents or more that actually got together for the Zoom for an hour and a half with Stephen and I. I think Carolyn joined us as well, I believe, if I recall. And I believe they recorded it, but I haven't seen the link yet to it. Essentially, they had a lot of questions and concerns, and they very much value the relationship that through the liaisons to school committee. And we basically tried to answer their questions as best we could. And when we had gaps in what we could do, we penned some questions down that we reviewed with them. And then they actually made their way finally to Dr. Guillory, most of which he has addressed in some fashion during the superintendent's update. And we'll be meeting with CPAC at their next meeting, February 7th, to open it up to the entire community again and continue this conversation as almost on a daily basis with the folks that are impacted by what's happening, and then questions other people have about it. So.
Thank you. Anybody else have?
Can I just on that? I'm not sure. I think Dr. Guillory is still online. One question, most of the questions that came up out of that were I think answered at this meeting. One question that wasn't though was about potential para shortages. I'm wondering if there are any updates about para shortages, either on a one-to-one basis or otherwise. Do we have any numbers about para hires? If that situation has changed at all since we met last?
I don't know that it has, Stephen, but I will ask both HR and OSS for their perspective on that. I checked in with HR, and I think there were 5 openings, but I think those are the ones that have already been reported.
Okay, sorry for thinking you were online.
Well, you see my name there.
Yeah, that threw me off.
Yeah, thanks to Jesse and Stephen and Carolyn for representing us at that meeting with families and having those difficult conversations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Carolyn?
I'll do a quick, I'm the BEF liaison. I attended their meeting, great fun, their fundraising. Just to remind people, we did get an invitation to the Trivia Bee. So whether people want to, I'd be up for doing a school committee table or not, but if people want to go individually, it's a great event. I will say that one time I won with my team. It might have been because Tom Galatano and Margaret Talmers and Deb Abner were on my team, but we did win.
Well, the school committee, in the beginning, when they first, actually, they had a spelling bee before they had the trivia bee. And they had the trivia bee, excuse me, they had the trivia bee. And Terry Kwan and Nancy Heller and myself won.
All right, so, but it would be great. It's a fun event, and obviously the BEF is a great organization.
It's a fundraiser, so
It's a fundraiser, yes, so we want to help them raise their funds.
Okay, any new business? Carolyn?
I'll do a new business, just following up on the public comment and noting that I think, which was referred to, I think it was end of summer, beginning of school year, so maybe 4 months ago, that our building leaders did come to us with a sort of urgent plea for the school committee to reinstate SROs or discuss it. It sounds like the select board moved it to us on November 12th. I'm not sure I understand what Stephen means about setting the parameters of a discussion. But I hope that can, I think it's kind of slow at this point, a response in terms of the need that was expressed. We've had some really tragic events recently involving students. Being a high school parent, I would dare say it's exactly the kind of situation that SROs perhaps could have really helped prevent. So, and it's really, really serious, people's lives. So I hope that that will move to our agenda.
I just add that I have previously asked for that in new business, and our chair mentioned that it was going to be docketed, but with no schedule. So I believe the words were, Andy, something that it would, it would be a long glide path to discuss it, and that's fine. I think given what we've heard this evening and what sort of we just, I think, know from the building leaders and society at large, we should probably think about moving a little faster. I don't know what the plan was in terms of when it would get docketed, but it's a zero cost and school safety. So
I'm thinking
I'm
thinking it's worth having a preliminary conversation maybe late in February. Our next 2 meetings in early February are very budget heavy.
Sure,
but
understood.
Later in February, I think we could start sounding out the school committee on where we might be headed.
Thank you.
And I'll just share, usually before we take up a brand new topic, I just like to have in that last block a brief discussion of what that new topic entails. The meeting after the next one, E2 and E3 are fully docketed for review. So that's a sneak preview, 2 meetings hence, where we'll fully discuss student safety and well-being and school safety and security, which can encompass both SROs and school surveillance / camera use.
I think there's overlap, but the SRO topic doesn't fall entirely within the topic of security. I mean, and some of the arguments have to do with safety and some go beyond that.
Okay, well, with that, we're going to adjourn. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Suzanne.
And everybody feel better.
I know, everybody
Not
feel
well.
better.
Good night.
Oy.
Good night.
Hey, Suzanne,
Good night, all.
Yeah.
Suzanne, we were supposed to have new business, and I was going to talk about the open meeting law thing.
We did just do new business,
Just did it.
Yeah,
but I
That
didn't.
was new, but you cut it off right at the end. Like I didn't get the chance to say it. So.
Oh.
Well, we're here. We're here.
Hold
Does it
on,
matter that the
Mariah.
Recording
Yeah.
in progress.
Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, there was the question raised about what happened at finance next week. And the only thing I want to add is that I reached out to town council and we're getting clarity on the applicability of the prior ruling to the current situation. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
more
you.
updates. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Mariah. I didn't mean to not call on you. I'm sorry. I didn't see you. Okay, we'll try again. Have a good night, everybody. All those who are sick, please feel better.
Yes.
And we're now
Good
adjourned.
night.